Last warning, walk away. Chief Ryan Walker laughed in her face, and 3 seconds later, he was flat on his back, staring at the sky, trying to understand how a woman he'd just called useless had put 220 pounds of decorated seal on the concrete without breaking a sweat. His 2 teammates rushed her. Neither one reached her. The entire yard went silent. Nobody on that base knew her name yet. By nightfall, not one of them would ever forget it. If you're new here, subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with me to the very end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning started the way most bad decisions do, quietly, casually, with nobody paying close enough attention. 6:15 a.m. at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado. San Diego and the compound was already alive. The kind of alive that only exists in places where men are constantly performing for each other. Where everything you do is a test, where weakness travels faster than any after-action report, and where the fastest way to lose your standing is to hesitate in front of someone whose respect you haven't earned yet. The evaluation that morning was a combat readiness drill. Standard enough on paper. A mixed unit of operators, a timed scenario, a set of performance metrics that looked reasonable in a briefing room and became something else entirely under the pressure of execution. Senior Chief Marcus Webb had been running these drills for 11 years. He knew the signs of a session that was about to go sideways. The particular quality of silence that showed up when ego started making decisions that training should be making instead. He saw it at 6:22. He didn't act fast enough. The young intelligence officer's name was Lieutenant Daniel Cho. He was 27 years old, 14 months out of Fort Meade, and he had made a mistake during the scenario, a communication delay that broke the timing of a coordinated element and forced a reset. In the real world, that delay was survivable. In the world of a training yard full of operators who needed someone to be wrong so that they could be right, it became something else entirely. Chief Ryan Walker found him at the water station, still going over his notes, replaying the sequence, trying to understand what he'd missed. Ryan didn't give him the chance to figure it out. "Hey, Intel boy." Cho looked up. He recognized Ryan immediately. Everyone did. Chief Ryan Walker was the kind of man who filled a room before he walked into it. 2 tours in the Middle East, 1 in East Africa, decorated 3 times, built like someone had assembled him out of aircraft components, and then forgot to install a volume control. He was 34 years old, and he carried those years like a weapon. "Chief Walker, you know what you cost us this morning," Ryan said, not asking, stating. He moved closer, and his 2 teammates, Petty Officer, First Class, Travis Cole, and Senior Petty Officer Luis Garza, moved with him the way they always did, the 3 of them forming a familiar shape that communicated exactly what it intended to communicate. You held the whole element because you couldn't read a simple grid reference on a 6-inch screen. The signal cut. I don't want to hear about the signal. Ryan stepped in closer. You know what happens downrange when intel blinks? People die, Cho. Real people. Not training dummies. Not points on a score sheet. People. Cho held his ground, which was either brave or unwise. Maybe both. I understand that, Chief. Do you? Travis Cole said from Ryan's left. Because standing there looking at your notes, instead of understanding why you failed, doesn't look like understanding to me. Looks like a man who doesn't know what business he's in. Luis Garza laughed, not the kind of laugh that invited you to join in. Cho's jaw tightened. He was doing the math that every junior officer learns to do in environments like this. The calculation between what you want to say, what you should say, and what you can survive saying. He said nothing, which was probably the right call. But the silence itself became a kind of target. Ryan leaned closer. You don't belong here, he said, quieter now, which was worse than the volume. You should be in an office somewhere typing things. Leave the real work to people who can handle it. The yard wasn't empty. It never was. 14 other personnel within range, some of them pretending to be occupied with other things, all of them listening. That was the nature of public humiliation. It required an audience to function. Ryan knew this. He'd been in enough of these moments to understand that the crowd mattered. The crowd always mattered, which is why he didn't hear her coming. I was so focused on Cho, on the performance of it, on the message he was sending to the 14 people pretending not to watch, that he didn't register the footsteps until she was already close enough that missing her would have required effort. She stopped 6 feet from the group. Nobody acknowledged her immediately. That was deliberate. Then Ryan turned his head and looked at her the way men who are used to setting the temperature of a room look at something they didn't plan for, with mild irritation and no particular concern. She was wearing standard tactical gear. No unit insignia visible. Her hair was pulled back with the efficiency of someone who solved problems rather than decorated them. She was watching Ryan with an expression that gave him absolutely nothing to work with. No anger, no fear, no anxiety, no performance. Just attention. The flat, complete attention of someone who had seen versions of this moment many times before and had already decided how it ended. Ryan turned back to Cho. As I was saying, enough. One word. She said it the way you close a door, not a slam, just a clean, definitive click. Final. Already done. The yard went quiet the way yards only go quiet when something unexpected has happened, and nobody's sure yet whether it's significant. Ryan turned back to her. Slowly. The slow turn was deliberate too, a signal to the room that he wasn't rattled, that he was choosing his pace, that this woman with her one word and her flat expression was not something that required urgency. "Excuse me," he said. "You heard me." She didn't move. "Walk away from him." Travis Cole made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Luis Garza's expression went through several things in quick succession before landing on something that looked like amusement. Ryan looked her up and down the full catalog, slow and obvious, designed to communicate assessment and dismissal simultaneously. He'd used the look 100 times. It worked. It didn't work now. "Lady." He let the word sit there. "This is an active training evaluation. These are senior operators, and this is a performance correction. I don't know which office you came from or who told you this was your business, but I need you to find somewhere else to be useful." The 14 people who were pretending not to watch had stopped pretending. She looked at Ryan for a moment, then at Travis, then at Luis, then back at Ryan. "Last warning," she said. "Walk away." Ryan smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. "Or what?" She didn't answer. And the silence that followed that non-answer was different from every other silence that morning. It had weight to it, texture, the kind of silence that arrives when someone who knows exactly what they're capable of has decided to stop explaining themselves. Ryan took a step toward her, and everything changed. What happened next lasted 3 seconds, and there are 14 different accounts of it, and all 14 are both accurate and incomplete. Because there are things that happen in 3 seconds that the eye catches, but the brain can't fully organize until long after. Ryan reached for her shoulder. He intended it as a physical demonstration of authority. The grip, the redirect, the unspoken statement that bodies make when words have supposedly failed. He had used this particular combination of motion and mass to communicate hierarchy in a dozen situations across 3 different combat theaters. It was practiced. It was controlled. It was, in his experience, effective. His hand never made contact. She moved the moment he committed to the reach, not backward, which is what the body expects in that situation, but sideways and in closing distance, rather than creating it, which breaks the mechanical logic of the reach entirely and turns the aggressor's own momentum into a liability. Her left hand intercepted his wrist. Her right hand found the inside of his elbow. Her hip came across his center of gravity, and then Ryan Walker, Chief Petty Officer, 2 combat tours, 3 commendations, 220 pounds of trained operator, was looking at the sky. He hit the ground hard enough to knock the breath out of him. Hard enough that the sound carried. The yard was completely silent for 1 full second. Then Travis Cole moved. He moved the way trained operators move when a teammate goes down fast, decisive, without thinking through all the implications, because thinking through implications takes time that the situation doesn't have. He came at her from the left. Luis Garza came from the right. Neither one of them made it to her. Travis found his arm extended at an angle his shoulder hadn't agreed to, and he was on his knees before he fully understood that the thing he'd been trying to grab was no longer in the position it had been when he started the grab. Luis's momentum was redirected with something that looked almost gentle. A pivot, a hand on his back, just enough pressure applied in exactly the right place to let his own speed carry him into the chain-link fence 3 feet to his right. No anger, no extra force, no performance. She simply moved, and the 3 men were on the ground, and she was standing in the center of it, with the same expression she'd worn before any of it happened, that flat, complete attention. As if she'd solved an equation rather than fought 3 men. She looked at Cho, who was standing very still with his notepad still in his hand, staring at her. "You're done here," she said to him quietly. "Get some water. Review your sequence." The delay came from a calibration error in the secondary relay, not from anything you did wrong. Someone will have the report corrected by 1400. Cho blinked, nodded, left. She looked at the 14 people who were not pretending to be occupied with anything anymore. "Training resumes in 10 minutes, she said. Then she walked away, and nobody in that yard said a single word for 30 seconds after she was gone. Ryan Walker was not a man who processed humiliation quietly or quickly. He sat in the office of Master Chief Daniel Hayes, 20 minutes after the incident, with a still reddening wrist and an expression that had moved through embarrassed angry and was currently somewhere in the territory of looking for who was responsible. "She attacked me," he said. Master Chief Hayes looked at him across a desk that had approximately 30 years of paperwork compressed into its grain. Hayes was 61 years old, and he had a face that looked like it had been subjected to weather events. He had deployed 7 times before his knees made the decision for him, and he had forgotten more about how operators behaved under pressure than most men in this building had yet learned. He looked at Ryan, the way men who know too much look at men who know just enough to be dangerous to themselves. "She redirected your reach," Hayes said. "She put me on the ground." "Yes. In front of my team." "Ryan." Hayes folded his hands on the desk. "I need you to stop talking for about 45 seconds, and I need you to listen. Can you do that?" Ryan said nothing, which Hayes apparently counted as compliance. "The woman you put your hand on this morning is Commander Maya Sterling." Hayes paused, not for effect. For accuracy, choosing words carefully, the way you choose footing on uncertain ground. "She isn't assigned here yet. She arrived this morning to observe the evaluation before her orientation briefing. She wasn't supposed to interact with any active personnel, so that part is on her, and I will address it." "Okay," Ryan said. "And the part where—" "I am still talking," Hayes said. Ryan closed his mouth. "The reason I want you to listen very carefully is that Commander Sterling's record is not fully available to you. It is not fully available to me. What I have access to is a summary, and the summary contains enough information that I want to be precise with you about what I say next." Hayes opened the folder on his desk. He didn't hand it across. He turned it so that Ryan could see it from the other side, just enough to establish that there was a document, that the document was real, and that what was in it mattered. "There are 4 years of service here that are designated classified at a level that requires authorization I don't have. What I can tell you from the portions I am authorized to read is this. Commander Sterling has worked alongside special operations units in 3 theaters. She has been involved in 11 operations, 7 of which were not officially acknowledged. She has completed SEAL qualification training, not as a modified program, not as an abbreviated variant. The full program. She held a qualifying assessment score that put her in the top 8% of any candidate in the history of the program." Ryan was quiet. Hayes looked at him steadily. She was also the primary extraction officer in a situation where a 6-man SEAL element was trapped in a hostile zone after their vehicle support was compromised. She went in alone on foot. She brought out 5 of the 6. The 6th didn't survive before she reached him. The operation took 14 hours. She was 29 years old. The room was very quiet. "The reason you haven't heard of her," Hayes continued, "is because the operations she was involved in were designed to be invisible. Not to protect the mission, to protect the operators. She insisted on that arrangement. Every operation she participated in where her involvement was the difference between extraction and loss. She requested that her role be unattributed. She didn't want credit. She wanted the operators she worked with to receive the recognition without any part of the story becoming about her. Ryan was looking at the folder now. Looking at it the way you look at something when you've realized it contains information about a world that existed alongside yours without you ever knowing. She's returning from her last assignment, Hayes said. I don't know all the details. What I know is that she lost people. People she was responsible for, and that she requested this posting, specifically requested this program, these operators, this compound for reasons that haven't been explained to me. What does she want here? Ryan said. His voice had changed. The anger hadn't gone. But something else had come into it, something more complicated. Hayes closed the folder. That, he said, is something you are going to have to earn the right to know. Maya Sterling sat in the briefing room on the east side of the compound and stared at the wall. She wasn't reading. She wasn't reviewing documents. She was doing the thing she'd trained herself to do in the spaces between operations, when the operational noise stopped and the other noise started. She was holding the quiet, staying inside it, not letting it push her somewhere she couldn't function. The thing about grief is that it doesn't announce its schedule. She had been back in the continental United States for 6 weeks. She'd spent 2 of those weeks at a facility in Virginia that she was not going to think about right now. She'd spent 3 in a kind of limbo, debriefings, evaluations, conversations with people who were trying to assess whether she was functional, and conversations with herself about why she was still trying to be. And she'd spent the last week traveling to San Diego, reviewing the program documentation, and preparing for a morning that had not gone the way she'd planned. She had not planned to be in that yard at 6:22. She'd arrived early. She always arrived early. It was a habit so deeply embedded that it had become something close to physiological, and she'd intended to observe the evaluation from a distance to get a read on the unit dynamics before any of them knew who she was. That had been the plan. The plan had dissolved the moment she saw what was happening to Cho. She'd recognized it immediately. Not just the content of it, the humiliation, the performance of dominance in front of an audience, but the specific kind of it. The kind that didn't come from strength. The kind that came from men who had experienced loss so significant that it had reshaped their understanding of what power was, and who were now spending that loss on people with less rank who couldn't spend it back. She'd seen it before. She'd done something close to it herself once years ago, at a moment she was not proud of, which was part of why she'd stepped in. She heard the door behind her open, and she didn't turn. You could have introduced yourself first, said a voice. She did turn then. The woman in the doorway was Lieutenant Commander Patricia Owens, the administrative coordinator for the training center, the person who had been assigned as Maya's initial point of contact. Patricia was 43, a former naval intelligence, with the particular professional efficiency of someone who had learned to manage complicated situations by being the calmest thing in the room at all times. I could have, Maya said. That would have been simpler. Simpler isn't always better. Patricia walked in, set a folder on the table, and sat down. Chief Walker is filing a grievance. You should know that. He has that right. Commander Hayes is managing it. He's handled it. Patricia paused. He told Walker more than I would have. He told him what he needed to hear, Maya said. Walker isn't stupid. He's suffering. Stupid and suffering look similar from the outside, but they respond to completely different things. Patricia studied her. You read his file. On the plane, I read all of them. All 23. Yes. Patricia was quiet for a moment. You want to tell me why this isn't a behavioral intervention program? The mandate I received outlined a tactical enhancement curriculum, advanced decision-making, under pressure, unconventional threat response, intelligence integration. Those things, Maya said. And yes, why do you think they're separate? I think a lot of people in this building are going to ask you that question. Good, Maya said. That means they're paying attention. Patricia looked at her steadily. Can I ask you something directly? Always better than indirectly. Why here? Why this specific posting? You had options. I've seen the documentation. You had 4 other options, any of which would have been quieter, easier, less complicated. She paused. You chose the most difficult configuration available. A unit with documented internal friction, a performance rating that's declining, and a leadership environment that was already resistant before you walked in this morning and put the most respected chief on the compound on the ground in front of his team. Maya was quiet for a moment. That's why, she said finally. Patricia waited. The difficult ones, Maya said. The ones who are already broken and don't know it yet. The ones who are using their pain to hurt people with less power because they don't have any other tool. Those are the ones who get people killed. She looked at Patricia steadily. I've seen what happens when someone like Walker gets into an operational environment without the foundation. I've stood next to the result of that. I've carried the weight of the result of that. She stopped. Something moved across her face and then was gone. I'm not here to make this easy. I'm here to make it necessary. Patricia sat with that for a moment. Then she slid the folder across the table. Your orientation briefing is at 1400. The program officially begins Monday. She stood. I'd suggest a lower profile between now and then. Maya looked at the folder, then at Patricia. Noted, she said. After Patricia left, Maya opened the folder. The first page was a roster. 23 names. 23 files she'd already read. 23 people who didn't know yet that everything they thought they understood about their own capabilities was about to be examined from the ground up. She found Walker's name near the top. Read it again. Read the operational record, the commendations, the psychological assessment from 14 months ago that used phrases like high-functioning grief response and possible avoidance patterns, and recommend continued monitoring. She set the page down. High-functioning grief response. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she recognized it. Because she had her own version of the same phrase in her own file, probably in different words. Because there was a particular kind of person who showed up in places like this, people who had survived something at a cost they hadn't finished paying, and the way they kept functioning was by converting the pain into a performance of control. She knew what Walker was. She knew because she was the same thing. The difference was that she had stopped performing. The difference was that someone years ago in a different compound in a different part of the world had stood in front of her and said enough, and she had been angry enough to fight it, and honest enough eventually to understand it. She hadn't been gentle about it. She owed that forward. By noon the story had traveled through the entire compound. This was inevitable. Compounds like this where closed ecosystems news moved the way it moved in small towns, which is to say, rapidly and with additions. By the time the account of the morning reached the enlisted barracks, Ryan Walker had been put on the ground 4 times by a former CIA operative who had survived a firefight in 3 countries simultaneously, which was factually impressive in the sense that it was factually impossible. Walker himself said nothing publicly. This was noted. Travis Cole made the mistake of telling 2 people exactly what he'd seen, which meant that by 1,320 people knew the precise mechanical sequence of what she'd done to Travis's arm. None of them said it in front of Travis. Luis Garza, who was constitutionally more adaptable than either of his teammates, had spent his lunch break doing something nobody expected. He'd gone to the compound library and looked up everything he could find on Maya Sterling. He found almost nothing. This troubled him more than too much information would have. He knew how to evaluate an abundance of data, what to weigh, what to discount, how to construct a profile from overlapping signals. He had no experience with a target that the system had almost entirely erased. Not because the information was suppressed exactly, but because the profile that should have existed, commendations, after-action references, deployment citations, training records, was present only in fragments, in outlines, in the shadows of documents where a name should have appeared and didn't. Someone had done work to make her invisible. Or she had done that work herself. Luis sat with this for a long time. At 1350, he went to find Ryan. He found him in the equipment room breaking down a rifle with the focused mechanical attention of a man who needed something to do with his hands. You know what I couldn't find, Luis said. Ryan didn't look up. Whatever it is, I don't care. A single bad report. About her. Anywhere. Not one. And I looked. Maybe she's good at politics. She put me into a chain-link fence without breaking a sweat, Louise said. That's not politics, that's something else. He paused. Walker, I need you to hear something. Ryan set down the bolt carrier, looked at him. I think we've been wrong about her, Louise said. Not wrong like we need to be nicer. Wrong like we've been operating on information we don't have, and filling the gaps with assumptions, and those assumptions are going to cost us. Ryan said nothing for a long moment. She stopped him, Louise said. Cho, she stepped in. She didn't have to do that. She could have filed a report, gone through channels, done the institutional thing. Instead, she walked up and said enough. In front of everyone, knowing exactly what it would cost her in terms of how the unit would receive her. She made it worse. She made it honest, Louise said. There's a difference. He looked at Ryan steadily. I'm going to the orientation briefing at 1400. I think you should come. Ryan looked at the disassembled rifle, at the pieces spread across the cloth. Then he began reassembling it, the clean, sure movements of a man who had done this so many times that it had become something close to prayer. Go, he said. Ryan, I'll be there, Ryan said. And then more quietly, in a voice that Louise had not heard from him in a long time. I just need a minute. Louise nodded and left. Ryan continued assembling the rifle, but his movements had slowed. He was thinking about something about a morning 3 years ago in a country he wasn't going to name when the extraction had failed, and he'd been the ranking operator, and the decisions had been his, and 2 of the people he'd made those decisions with hadn't come home. He didn't think about it directly. He never thought about it directly. He thought around it the way you drive around a place that still belongs to something you haven't finished with yet. He thought about what Hayes had said. She went in alone. She brought out 5 of the 6. He thought about the woman standing in the yard with her hands loose at her sides. He thought about what it meant to carry something for a long time without putting it down. He put the rifle together, set it on the cloth, stood up, and walked toward the briefing room at 13:58, 2 minutes before the orientation began. She was already there. Of course she was. She stood at the front of the room, not behind the podium, but beside it, one hand resting on the table, reviewing a document with the same quality of focused attention. She gave everything. The room had 15 people in it already. She had not begun. She was waiting for the room to settle, for people to stop performing for each other and start paying attention. Ryan came in last. She didn't look up when he entered, but something in her posture registered it, a slight, almost invisible adjustment. The kind of shift that happens when a person who is already aware of everything in the room becomes more specifically aware of one particular thing. He found a seat near the back. She looked up then, took in the room in a single slow sweep. My name is Commander Maya Sterling, she said. I've been assigned to lead this unit's advanced operational training program, effective Monday. I want to start by telling you something that might be unexpected. She paused. I'm not going to tell you what this program is going to look like. Not yet. Because the shape of the program depends entirely on what you need, and I don't know yet what you need. I've read your files. Files are information. They're not knowledge. The room was quiet. I know that most of you heard about what happened this morning, she said. I'm not going to address the details of it. What I'm going to say is this: if any of you came in here today expecting that the next few months are going to be an extension of what you've already done in the ways you've already done it, with the framing you've already used, then I need you to release that expectation right now. Because the only thing I can guarantee about this program is that it's going to ask you for something you weren't planning to give. Someone near the front. Ryan couldn't see who shifted in their seat. You're going to be uncomfortable, Maya said. Some of you are going to be angry. Some of you are going to try to find ways to argue that the discomfort is the problem. It's not. The discomfort is the evidence that something is happening. Pain means you're in contact with something real. She looked around the room. The only failure in this program is stopping. That's it. That's the only thing that ends it for you. She held the room for a moment in the particular silence that follows a statement that lands. Then she said, questions. Petty Officer Second Class Elena Vargas, who was 26 years old, and who had a reputation for asking the questions nobody else wanted to ask, raised her hand. "What happened to the unit you were with before?" she said. "Before you came here?" The room went slightly tense. Several people looked at Vargas as if she'd stepped on something without checking first. Maya looked at her. Something moved across her face, a flicker of something that was not quite pain and not quite respect, but was in the neighborhood of both. "I lost people," Maya said. Her voice was the same tone, the same measured delivery. But something in it was different, a density, a weight that hadn't been there in the previous sentences. "Operators I trained. Operators I was responsible for. I made decisions that I believed were correct, and that turned out to cost people I cared about their lives." The room was very still. "That's why I'm here," she said. "Not because I have all the answers. Because I've lived through the cost of the wrong ones." She let that settle. Then she moved on, and the briefing continued, and the room slowly let out a breath it hadn't known it was holding. Ryan sat in the back and said nothing. But he was listening. Really listening, maybe for the first time in months. And when she looked up during a pause in her presentation, and her eyes moved across the back of the room and found his. Just for a second, just long enough to register, he didn't look away. He held it, and she held it back. And something passed between them that neither of them would have been able to name, but that both of them recognized the particular acknowledgement between two people who have been carrying the same weight in different containers for a long time, and who have just in the space of a glance figured that out. She looked away first, back to the room, back to the work. But the look had happened, and Ryan Walker sat in the back of that briefing room and tried to remember the last time he'd felt something other than the performance of being okay. He couldn't, which meant something was already changing, whether he was ready for it or not. Monday morning came at 0400, and Maya Sterling was already standing in the training bay when the first operator walked in and stopped dead in the doorway. "Ma'am, the schedule said 06. "The schedule was wrong," Maya said. "Or you read it wrong, or somebody told you what it said instead of you checking. Which one was it?" The operator, petty officer, 2nd class, Andre Ellis, 28. 2 deployments. A man who had never in his life been the first person awake anywhere, opened his mouth and found nothing in it. "That's the right answer," Maya said. "You don't know. Sit down." By 04:15, 11 of the 23 had arrived, all of them wearing some version of the same expression. By 04:30, 19, Elena Vargas came in at 04:22 with wet hair and a look on her face that suggested she had run the entire way and was furious about it, and she took a seat in the front row without a word. Ryan Walker came in at 04:51. Maya didn't look at him. "Chief Walker," she said, still facing the wall. "How many hours of sleep did you get?" Ryan stopped in the aisle. "Ma'am, it's not a trap. How many?" 4, maybe 5. "Good." Now she turned. "That's honest and it's useful, and it's the first true thing anybody's told me in this building. Sit down." Travis Cole came in behind him with his arm in a compression sleeve and an attitude he was doing a poor job of hiding. Luis Garza came in behind Travis. Nobody said anything about the sleeve. Everybody looked at it. Maya waited until all 23 were seated. Then she said one sentence. "Nobody in this room knows how to lose." Somebody in the back made a sound. Not quite a laugh. "Say it out loud," Maya said. "Whoever that was. If you've got a reaction, I want it in the air where it can be useful, not in your chest, where it turns into resentment." Silence for 3 full seconds. Then Travis Cole said, "That's a hell of a thing to say to a room full of people with combat deployments, ma'am." "It is." "You want to explain it?" "I'd rather show you," Maya said. "But since you asked, every one of you has been trained inside a system that measures you against a standard, and every one of you has learned to hit that standard. That's not the same as knowing how to lose. That's knowing how to pass." She let it sit. The problem with knowing how to pass is that the enemy doesn't grade on a curve. The enemy doesn't announce the rubric. And when the standard stops applying, when the mission breaks, in a way the manual didn't predict, the men who only know how to pass will keep trying to pass. They'll keep executing the standard. and they'll die executing it correctly right up until the last second. The room did not respond. "I've watched it happen," Maya said quietly. 3 times. That was when the room went completely still. The first exercise was 31 minutes long, and every single person in the unit failed it. That was the design. Maya had built it that way, and she'd built it that way deliberately, and she had known before she walked into that bay exactly how long it would take them to understand. It took them 19 minutes. The scenario was a hostage recovery in an urban structure with a clock 3 unknowns and a communications element run through Lieutenant Daniel Cho, who had been reassigned to the program at Maya's direct request over the objection of 2 people whose names she had not shared with anyone. At the 11-minute mark, Cho's feed went down. At the 13-minute mark, Travis Cole's element breached a door that Maya's scenario parameters had marked as a hard stop because Travis had decided that the absence of intel meant the absence of a threat. At the 16-minute mark, the exercise controller called a simulated casualty on Andre Ellis. At the 19-minute mark, Ryan Walker stopped moving in the middle of a hallway and said on an open channel loud enough for everyone, "The intel isn't down," she cut it. And Maya, standing in the control room with her arms folded and her eyes on the monitors, said one word into her own headset. "Correct." Then she cut the lights. They sat on the floor of the training bay afterward, all 23, because Maya had told them to, and because nobody had the energy left to argue about it. Travis Cole's shirt was soaked through. Elena Vargas had a scrape across her cheekbone that she hadn't noticed yet. Ryan sat with his back against a support column and his forearms on his knees and did not look at anybody. "Tell me what happened," Maya said. "You sabotaged us," Travis said. "I removed a resource. Try again." "With respect, ma'am, that's the same thing." "It is not remotely the same thing, and the fact that you can't tell the difference is the reason you're sitting on this floor." Maya crouched down so she was at their level. "Cole, when your feed went dark, what was your first thought? Not what you said out loud. Your first thought." Travis hesitated. "Say it," Maya said. "There's no consequence in this room for honesty. There are consequences for everything else. I thought she's testing us. I thought it was fake." "And what did that thought do to your behavior?" Travis was quiet. "It made you angry," Maya said. "And angry made you fast, and fast made you sloppy, and sloppy put you through a door that was marked hard stop. In the scenario, that door had 2 armed men behind it, and you were dead 9 seconds after you crossed the threshold." She held his eyes. "You didn't die because you lacked skill. You died because your ego needed the blackout to be a trick instead of a condition." Travis's jaw worked. He didn't answer. "Vargas," Maya said. "What did you do when the feed went down?" "I stopped." "For how long?" 4 seconds, maybe 5. "Why?" Elena thought about it. "Because I didn't have information, and I didn't want to move without any." "And what did the rest of your element do while you were stopped?" "They kept moving." "Did you follow them?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Elena's face changed. Something in it went tight. "Because I was the only one standing still, and it felt—" She stopped. "Say it." "It felt like everybody was going to think I froze." "There it is," Maya said, and her voice was not unkind. "That is the most expensive sentence in this room. You had the correct instinct. You were the only person in a 23-man unit who responded to an information blackout the way an operator should respond. And you abandoned the correct instinct in under 5 seconds because you were afraid of how it would look." She stood up. "That's not a skill problem. That's a culture problem. And a culture problem is my problem." Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Ryan Walker spoke, still not looking up. "How many did you lose?" The bay went quiet in a new way. Maya turned toward him. "You said you'd watched it happen 3 times, Ryan said. "Men executing the standard correctly right up until the last second. I want to know how many." Elena Vargas turned to look at him. So did half the room. Maya was silent for 4 seconds. 9, she said. Then she walked out. Master Chief Daniel Hayes found her in the equipment cage at 1940 minutes after she should have been off the compound doing inventory on gear that had already been inventoried twice. "That's a good way to make yourself useless tomorrow," he said. "I don't sleep much anyway." "I noticed." Hayes leaned against the doorframe. "Walker didn't file the grievance." Maya's hands paused for half a second on a carabiner, then kept going. "He withdrew it this morning," Hayes said. "Came to my office at 0340, which means he was awake before you were. Said he'd made a determination that filing it would be, and I'm quoting, a waste of everybody's time, including mine. That's not an apology. No, it isn't. That's a man walking as far toward one as his pride will physically carry him." Hayes watched her work. "You know he's the reason the unit's rating is where it is. Not because he's bad at the job, because he's excellent at it, and he's been excellent at it in a way that's been slowly poisoning everybody around him for about 2 years now." "I read the file." "The file doesn't say that. I say that." Maya set down the carabiner. "Then say it properly." Hayes was quiet for a moment. 3 years ago, Walker was ranking on an element in a place I'm not going to name, he said. Extraction went bad. Comms went down. He made a call, split the element, sent 4. One way took 2, the other. It was the right call with the information he had. It was also the call that killed 2 men, one of whom had been his roommate since Bud's. Hayes's voice didn't change, but something under it did. "He came home. He got the medal. Nobody ever told him he was wrong because he wasn't wrong, and I have watched that man spend 3 years trying to find a version of the story where he was, because being wrong would be easier than being right, and having it not matter." Maya stood very still. "You know what that is?" Hayes said. "Yes." "Thought you might." She turned to face him. "Master Chief, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me if I'm out of line." "Ask." "The comms failure in Friday's evaluation. The one Cho took the blame for. I told him it was a secondary relay calibration error." She paused. "It wasn't." Hayes went very still. "I pulled the maintenance log to confirm before I put it in writing," Maya said. "The relay was calibrated 11 days ago, signed off by 2 techs. It was inside tolerance on Thursday night, and it was inside tolerance on Friday afternoon, 4 hours after the evaluation. The only 40-minute window in which that relay was out of spec was the exact 40-minute window of the evaluation. That could be a hardware fault." "It could be. Hardware faults don't reset themselves." Hayes said nothing for a long time. "Who else knows?" he said finally. "Nobody. And I told a 27-year-old lieutenant that a report would be corrected by 1400, and I have not corrected it because the moment I correct it, whoever did this knows I looked." Hayes exhaled slowly. "Commander, you've been on this compound for 4 days. I'm aware. You put my best chief on the deck. You rewrote a training curriculum that took a working group 8 months to build. And now you're telling me you think somebody in this building interfered with a communications relay during a live evaluation. Yes. You understand how that's going to sound." "I understand exactly how it's going to sound," Maya said, "which is why I'm telling you and not writing it down." Hayes looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face, something old and tired and extremely far from surprised, moved. "Second time this year," he said. Maya's head came up. "What?" Hayes didn't answer right away. Then he said, "March. Different unit. Different relay. Same 40-minute pattern." He met her eyes. "I flagged it. It went upstairs. It came back marked as a maintenance anomaly closed, no further action." "Who closed it?" "That's the part," Hayes said, "that I've been trying to find out for 4 months." The next morning, Maya put the unit through a scenario with no failure conditions at all. She didn't tell them that. She told them it was a graded exercise with a pass threshold of 88%, and she watched 23 men and women burn themselves down to the studs, chasing a number that did not exist. And at the end of it, she stood in front of them and said, "There was no threshold. There was no score. I made it up." The reaction was immediate, and it was ugly. "That's a game," Andre Ellis said, and there was real anger in it. "Ma'am, with respect, that's a game, and we're not—" "Ellis, What did you do at the 22-minute mark? He stopped. You had a teammate down, and a route that would have gotten you to the objective 4 minutes faster if you left him, Maya said. What did you do? Ellis's mouth closed. You left him, Maya said. You marked his position, you called it in, and you left him because you were at 79% and you needed 9 more points. The Bay was silent. I want everybody in this room to sit with that for a second, Maya said. Because I need you to understand something, and I need you to understand it now in a training bay in San Diego, and not in 11 months in a place where the mistake is permanent. Her voice dropped. You will always be given a number. Somebody will always hand you a metric and tell you it's the mission. And the number will always be a simplification of something more complicated made by someone who is not standing where you're standing. She looked at Ellis. Your job is not to hit the number. Your job is to know what the number was for. Ellis stared at the floor. Ma'am. Travis Cole's voice, and it had something new in it. If we can't trust the parameters, you can't. Then what the hell are we supposed to trust? Maya looked at him. Each other, she said. That's the whole answer. That's the only answer there has ever been. Everything else in your professional life is going to lie to you. Eventually, the intel, the schedule, the extraction window, the number. The only thing that doesn't lie is whether the person next to you will come back for you. She let that land. So the question I'm actually asking every day, in every scenario, is not whether you can hit 88%. It's whether the man on your left believes you'll come back. Nobody moved. Then Elena Vargas said quietly, Ellis, I'd have come back for you. Ellis didn't look up, but his shoulders came down about an inch. And Travis Cole, who had spent 4 days being the loudest resistance in the room, said nothing at all, which was the single largest concession he had made in 18 months. Cho found her that afternoon in the operations annex with a laptop under his arm and the specific electric look of a man who had discovered something he wished he hadn't. Commander, do you have 4 minutes? I have as many as this takes. Sit. He sat. He turned the laptop toward her. You told me Friday that the delay came from a secondary relay calibration error. I did. With respect, ma'am, that's not true. Maya's expression did not change. Go on. I pulled the log. The relay was inside tolerance. I thought maybe I misread it, so I pulled the raw signal data instead of the summary, because the summary is generated by the same system that would report the fault, and if you're going to check a system, you shouldn't check it with itself. He turned the screen a few degrees. The relay didn't fail, ma'am. It handed off. Say that again. It handed off. There's a redundancy protocol if a primary node degrades traffic reroutes to a secondary path, so the operators never notice. That protocol fired at 0631 on Friday. It shouldn't have. Nothing degraded. Cho's voice had gone tight. Something told it to. Maya sat back. Somebody triggered a reroute, she said. Somebody triggered a reroute, and for 40 minutes every piece of comm traffic in that evaluation went through a secondary path instead of the primary. Cho swallowed. And the secondary path doesn't log the same way. It's a fallback. It's designed to keep you talking, not to keep records. So for 40 minutes. For 40 minutes, nobody was writing down who was listening, Cho said. The room was very quiet. Lieutenant, Maya said. How many people know you pulled that raw data? Nobody, ma'am. I did it on a standalone terminal. Why? Cho hesitated. And then he said something that made Maya look at him properly for the first time, not as an officer she'd defended in a yard, but as a resource she had badly underestimated. Because the last person who flagged a comms anomaly on this compound got a maintenance closure and a reassignment, he said. March, Petty Officer Reyes. He's in Norfolk now. Maya went absolutely still. You knew about March. Ma'am, I'm an intelligence officer, Cho said. I've known about March since March. I've just never had anybody in this building I could say it to. That night, Ryan Walker knocked on the door of Maya's office at 2100 and stood in the doorway like a man who had rehearsed something in a car and then forgotten all of it on the walk-in. Chief. Ma'am. You want to come in, or you want to keep doing that? He came in. He didn't sit. I withdrew the grievance, he said. I know. I'm not. He stopped, started again. I'm not saying that to get credit for it. Good. You wouldn't have gotten any. Something that was almost a laugh moved across his face and died. He looked at the wall for a moment. 9, he said. Maya said nothing. You said 9, in the bay. He finally looked at her. I've been thinking about that number for 36 hours, and I can't get it to sit down. Why not? Because 2 is enough to end a man, Ryan said. I know that from the inside. I know exactly what 2 costs. And I have been walking around this compound for 3 years, like I'm carrying something nobody else could lift. And then you say 9, like it's a data point, and I can't. His voice cracked in the middle of the sentence, and he stopped and got it back. I don't understand how you're still standing up. Maya was quiet for a long moment. I wasn't, she said. For about 8 months I wasn't. Ryan looked at her. There's a version of this conversation where I tell you it gets better, and you feel encouraged and you leave, Maya said. I'm not going to have that conversation with you because it's a lie, and because you'd know it was a lie, and then you'd never believe anything else I told you. She folded her hands. It doesn't get better. It gets different. The weight doesn't decrease. You get stronger or you don't. That's not comforting. No, it's true. Pick one. Ryan laughed, actually laughed short and surprised and slightly broken. How'd you get stronger? He said. Somebody stood in front of me and told me I was hurting people, Maya said. And I was so angry that I nearly ended my career over it. And then about 4 months later, I realized she'd been right, and that if she hadn't said it, I would have gotten somebody killed being angry at a thing that wasn't their fault. Ryan's face changed. She, he said. Master Chief Alicia Ward, Maya said. She's the reason I'm standing here, and she was one of the 9. The silence after that was total. Ryan Walker stood in the middle of that office and did not know what to do with his hands. I'm sorry, he said finally. And it wasn't the sentence he'd rehearsed in the car, and it wasn't about the grievance, and both of them knew exactly what it was about. I know, Maya said. He nodded once, turned to go, and at the door he stopped. Ma'am, can I say one more thing and have it not be insubordination? You can say anything to me in this room. That's what the room is for. Ryan turned around. Something's wrong on this compound, he said. And I don't mean the unit. I mean something else, something structural. Maya's expression did not move a millimeter. Explain. Friday's evaluation, Ryan said. I've run that scenario 40 times in 6 years. 40. And in 40 runs that comm architecture has never gone down. Not once. Not in a rainstorm, not with 190 personnel on the net, not during the September surge when everything else on this base browned out. He took a step back into the room. It went down on the exact morning that a new commander was scheduled to observe. And I know how that sounds. I know exactly how paranoid that sounds. But ma'am, I've been doing this a long time, and I've learned that when something that has never failed fails on the one day that matters, that's not weather. Maya looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she said, Sit down, Chief. By Thursday, the unit had changed in ways that would have been hard to describe to anybody who hadn't been in that bay all week. Andre Ellis went back for a simulated casualty at a cost of 6 minutes and 11%. And when the exercise ended, he stood up and said, before anybody asked, I'd do it again. And 3 people applauded, and 2 of them were people who had spent 4 days calling Maya's program a waste of taxpayer money. Elena Vargas stopped moving during an information blackout and stayed stopped for 11 seconds, and when her element leader shouted at her over the net, she said, Negative, I'm holding, and held, and the scenario proved her right. Travis Cole came to Maya's office and actually asked in words out loud, whether she'd teach him the thing she'd done to his arm. Why? Because I've been running it in my head for a week and I can't figure out where the leverage came from, Travis said. And that bothers me more than the arm did. That, Maya said, is the correct reason. And Ryan Walker started arriving at 0330 and running the scenario logs from the night before with Cho. The two of them side by side at a standalone terminal in an annex. Nobody used an intelligence lieutenant and a SEAL chief who 6 days earlier had been on opposite sides of a public humiliation, cross-referencing 40 minutes of missing signal traffic and saying almost nothing to each other except numbers. On Thursday afternoon, they found the second one. April 12th, Cho said. Same protocol, same handoff, 34 minutes. During what? Personnel movement briefing. Roster assignments for a Pacific rotation. Ryan sat back slowly. Cho. Yes, Chief. What was Friday's evaluation actually about? Not the scenario. What was in the traffic? Cho went pale. Names, he said. Call signs. Element compositions. Ma'am, Chief, the whole point of Friday was to establish operator assignments for the new program. That entire 40 minutes was a list of who's going to be doing what for the next 18 months. And April 12th was a Pacific rotation roster. Yes. And March, Ryan said, was what? Cho pulled up the file, scanned it, and his hands went still on the keyboard. March was a deployment schedule, he said quietly. Departure windows, transit routes. Neither of them said anything for a moment. They're not stealing tactics, Ryan said. They're stealing people. Maya took it to Hayes at 1800 with a 2-page summary and no digital copy. Hayes read it twice. You're certain? I'm certain about the pattern. I'm not certain about the source. That's the part that'll kill you. Hayes set the pages down. Commander, 3 incidents, 3 different systems, 3 different closures. That's not a hacker. That's somebody with credentials. Yes. Somebody with credentials who knew the evaluation schedule. Yes, which is a list of about 40 people. 26, Maya said. I checked. Hayes closed his eyes briefly. Of course you did. Master Chief, there's a piece of this you're not saying. Hayes opened his eyes. You flagged March, Maya said. It went upstairs, it came back closed. You've spent 4 months trying to find out who closed it, and you haven't been able to. On a compound where you've served for 9 years and know every single person by their first name. She held his eyes. Which means the closure came from somebody senior enough to be invisible to you. And I want to know why you didn't lead with that. Hayes was silent for a very long time. Then he walked to the door and closed it. Because there's one more thing, he said. And I've been sitting on it since Friday, and I've been trying to decide whether telling you makes you an asset or a target. Tell me. You're posting here, Hayes said. Your orders. You requested this billet, correct? I requested it in April, yes. You didn't get it in April. Hayes came back and stood behind his chair, both hands on the back of it. Your request was declined in April, twice. I have the correspondence. The billet was filled by another officer, and the assignment was finalized on May 2nd. Maya's face did not move, but something behind it did. Then why am I here? Because on May 19th, that officer was reassigned without explanation, Hayes said. And on May 20th, your request was approved by someone who had declined it twice with no additional documentation, no interview, and no justification on file. He looked at her. Commander, you did not fight your way onto this compound. Somebody put you here. The silence in that office was absolute. Who? Maya said. That's what I can't find out. Master Chief, I've pulled it 4 times. The approval authority field is populated. The name resolves to a valid billet code. And every time I try to trace the billet code to an actual human being, it routes to an office that doesn't have a duty officer assigned. Hayes's voice was flat and controlled, and underneath it was something Maya had not heard from him before, which was fear. There is a person in this chain who exists on paper and nowhere else. And that person wanted you here badly enough to move somebody else out to do it. Maya sat down slowly. They wanted me here, she said. Yes. 6 weeks after I lost 9. Hayes said nothing. Master Chief, Maya said, and her voice had gone very quiet and very steady, which was the most dangerous thing about it. I need you to understand something about the operation where I lost those 9. The compromise was not tactical. It was not a bad call. It was not weather. It was not luck. Somebody knew where my people were going to be, and they knew it 11 hours before we knew it. She looked up. I have spent 6 weeks being told that was impossible. And now you're telling me that the same building that has a ghost in its personnel system reached across an ocean and pulled me into it. Hayes went white. You think it's connected? I think, Maya said, that I have been very carefully brought to the exact place where the person who killed my team can watch me. She didn't sleep that night. At 0240, she was in the annex with a legal pad writing out 26 names in her own handwriting, because handwriting doesn't sync to anything. And at 0310, the door opened, and Ryan Walker walked in with 2 cups of coffee and didn't say a word about the hour. He set one down beside her, looked at the list. That's the 26. That's the 26. Can I see it? You can see it if you understand what it cost you to see it, Maya said. The last man who looked at something like this is in Norfolk. Ryan pulled up a chair and sat down. Ma'am, he said. A week ago I put my hand on your shoulder in front of 40 people because I thought being the biggest thing in the room was the same as being useful. I've had 7 days to think about what that actually made me, and I don't much care for the answer. He nodded at the pad. Let me see it. Maya slid it across. He read it, slowly. All 26. And halfway down the second column he stopped. He didn't say anything. He just stopped, and his finger came to rest under a name, and he sat there for 11 seconds without moving. Chief. Ryan didn't look up. Chief. What? This name, Ryan said. What about it? How was on my extraction? Ryan said. His voice had gone strange thin, careful like a man walking on something he wasn't sure would hold. 3 years ago. The one where I lost Danny and Reyes Ortiz. He wasn't on the ground. He was rear echelon coordination cell. He was the guy passing us the routing. He finally looked up, and his eyes were wrong. Ma'am, he's the one who gave me the split. The two-way split. He fed me the route that put 4 one way and 2 the other. Maya's hands went flat on the desk. You told me that was your call. It was my call, Ryan said. I made it. I own it. I've owned it for 3 years. His throat worked. But I made it off a threat picture that he handed me. And I have never, not once, not in 3 years, not in 1100 nights of lying awake, I have never asked where he got it. The 2 of them sat there in the dark with a legal pad between them, and 26 names on it, and one of those names sitting under Ryan Walker's finger like a live round. What's the name? Maya said, and Ryan Walker said it out loud. Vance, Ryan said. Commander Elliot Vance. Maya didn't move. Say it again. Elliot Vance. He was a lieutenant commander then. Coordination cell rear echelon 300 miles from where we were standing. Ryan's finger was still pressed against the name like he was holding it down so it couldn't get away. He's a full commander now, Deputy Director of Operations Support. He's got an office on the 2nd floor of the administration building, and I have walked past his door probably 400 times. He handed you the routing. He handed me everything, Ryan said. Threat picture movement corridors, the whole package, and I looked at it, and I made the split, and I have spent 3 years believing the split was the mistake. He looked up, and his eyes were doing something Maya had never seen them do. What if the split was correct? What if I did the right math on numbers somebody handed me knowing they were wrong? Chief? What if I've been carrying the wrong thing? Ryan. She said his name, not his rank, and it stopped him. Listen to me very carefully because this is the part where good men destroy themselves. You do not know that yet. What you have is a name on a list of 26 that happens to intersect with the worst day of your life. And human beings are pattern-making machines. And grief will build you a conspiracy out of a coincidence in about 9 seconds if you let it. You don't believe that. I believe it's possible, Maya said. That's not the same as not believing you. It's discipline. If we go at this man on the strength of what you're feeling right now, and we're wrong, we're finished. You're finished. I'm finished. Cho's in Norfolk, and whoever's actually doing this gets a clean run for the next 20 years. Ryan sat back slowly, breathed out through his nose. So what do? We do it properly, Maya said. We do it so quietly that if we're wrong, nobody ever knows we looked. She got 4 hours of sleep and ran the unit into the ground at 05. That was deliberate too. 23 people who were exhausted were 23 people who weren't watching her. And Maya needed the compound to see exactly what it expected to see. A new commander obsessed with her program, buried in her curriculum, too busy to be curious about anything else. So she made it real. She built a scenario with a compromised element and no clean extraction, and she ran it 3 times, and every time the unit found a solution, she took the solution away and made them find another one. By the second run, Travis Cole had stopped complaining. By the third, he had started thinking out loud, in a way that Elena Vargas said later was the first time in 2 years she'd heard him say the words, "I don't know," without an apology attached. At the debrief, Andre Ellis raised his hand. "Ma'am, permission to say something that might be stupid." "Stupid's free. Dishonest costs. When you take the solution away every time we solve it, you break it. That's not about the scenario, is it?" "What's it about?" "It's about getting used to it," Ellis said slowly. "The breaking. So that when it happens for real, our first reaction isn't shock. Because shock costs seconds. And we don't have seconds." The bay was quiet. "Ellis," Maya said, "where were you 2 weeks ago?" "Ma'am." 2 weeks ago, you were a man who left a teammate on the floor to chase a number that didn't exist. That answer you just gave me is a completely different operator." She looked around the room. "That's what this is. Not fitness, not marksmanship. You've all got those. This is the part where you stop being men who execute and start being men who understand. And understanding is the only thing that survives contact with a bad day." Somebody in the back said quietly, "Hooyah." And then 11 people said it, and then 23 did. Ryan Walker, standing at the side of, with his arms folded, felt something move in his chest that he had not felt in 3 years and did not have a name for. Commander Elliot Vance came down to the training bay at 1400 on Friday. He came with 2 coffees, one of which he offered to Maya, and a smile that had clearly been getting him what he wanted since roughly the age of 19. "Commander Sterling, I've been trying to get down here all week." "Commander Vance." "You know my name." "I read the org chart on day 1, Maya said. "I read everything on day 1. It's a character flaw." Vance laughed. He was 46 silver at the temples, built like a man who still ran, but didn't have to prove it anymore. Warm. Genuinely warm. That was the thing Maya noted immediately, and noted with a kind of cold professional interest. Nothing about him performed. He wasn't trying. Men who were hiding something usually tried. "I'll be honest with you," Vance said. "There's been noise upstairs about your program." "I'd assumed." "You put a chief on the deck in front of the yard." "I did." "You want to tell me why?" "Because he put his hand on me," Maya said. "And because there were 14 people watching who needed to see what happens when somebody does that." Vance nodded slowly. "That's the answer I was hoping for. The other answer was going to be a problem." "What was the other answer?" "It was a misunderstanding," he said. "Anybody gives me that answer, I know they're managing me." He sipped his coffee. "For what it's worth, Sterling, I read your summary. What I'm cleared for. It's not much, but it's enough to know that the people making noise upstairs don't have any idea who they're making noise about." "Who's making the noise?" "Ah." He smiled. "That's the part where I have to be an administrator instead of a person." "Try being a person." Vance looked at her for a beat longer than the conversation required. "There's a review board convening in 11 days, he said. "Program viability. It's not unusual. New curriculum mid-cycle. They'll want to see numbers." He paused. "It is a little unusual that it was scheduled 6 days after you arrived before you had generated any numbers at all." Maya kept her face empty. "Who scheduled it?" "Operations support," Vance said. "Which is me. You scheduled a review board on your own program. I scheduled a review board because if I hadn't, somebody else was going to, and I'd rather own the calendar than react to it." He set the coffee down. "Sterling, I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to leave because if I stay, I'll talk myself out of it. There are people in this building who want your program to fail. I don't know all of them, and I don't know why. What I know is that in 19 years, I have never seen a billet moved the way yours was moved, and I've never seen a curriculum approved that fast, and I have been sitting in my office for 6 weeks with a very uncomfortable feeling that I am watching two different chess games being played on the same board. He picked his coffee back up. 11 days, he said. Give me something I can defend. And he walked out. Maya stood there for a long moment. Then she went and found Ryan. He's either the best liar I have ever met in my life, she said, or he's not our man. Cho found the fourth one on Saturday. He'd been running the pattern backward for 6 days, every reroute, every handoff, every 30 to 40-minute window where the primary comm architecture had quietly stepped aside and let traffic slide down a path that didn't keep records. He'd found March. He'd found April. He'd found Friday. What he found Saturday wasn't in the past. Ma'am. He had run. He was still breathing hard. It's scheduled. What is? The reroute. There's a maintenance flag on the primary node, pre-entered. It's sitting in the system right now with a future timestamp. He turned the laptop around. Thursday, 0710 to 0752, 42 minutes. Maya's stomach went cold. What's Thursday at 0710? Cho didn't answer. Lieutenant, what's Thursday? The overwater exercise, Cho said. Ma'am, it's your exercise. It's the culminating phase you put on the calendar Tuesday. 2 boats, 18 personnel live insertion off Point Loma with real assets and a real safety net. And live comms, Maya said. And live comms. She sat down. That's not a leak, she said quietly. Ma'am, March was a leak. April was a leak. Friday was a leak. Somebody sitting quiet taking what floats by. Maya looked up, and Cho took an involuntary step back, because he had never seen her face do that before. This is different. This is somebody putting a hand on the wheel and steering. They're not waiting for information anymore. They're creating the window. For what? That, Maya said, is exactly the right question. She did not go to Hayes. That was the hardest call she'd made in 6 weeks, and she made it at 02 in the morning with a legal pad in front of her, and it cost her something to make it, and she made it anyway. Because Hayes had flagged March. Hayes had spent 4 months hunting the closure authority. Hayes had been the one to tell her about the ghost in her own orders, and Hayes was also the one person on the compound who knew exactly how much she knew. She wrote his name on the pad, looked at it. Then she wrote underneath it in her own handwriting, "Assume nothing, especially the people you like." She had learned that sentence from Alicia Ward. Alicia Ward had been the 9th. Ryan came to her office on Sunday with a folder and a look. I did what you said. Quiet. Nothing digital. He set it down. I went and had a beer with a guy named Petty Officer First Class Dominic Reyes. Norfolk Reyes. Norfolk Reyes flew in yesterday for his sister's wedding in Chula Vista, which I know because his sister posts about it on the internet like a normal human being, which is the single greatest intelligence source in the history of the United States Navy, and nobody in this building will admit it. Ryan almost smiled. He talked for 2 hours, ma'am. He'd been waiting 4 months for somebody to ask. What'd he say? He said he flagged the March anomaly on a Tuesday. He said by Friday he had a reassignment order. He said in between exactly 1 person came to see him about it. Ryan's jaw set. A civilian analyst, contract billet, came to his workspace, asked him to walk through what he'd found, told him she'd carry it up the chain personally, took his notes, physical notes, said she'd get them into the right hands. Name. He never got one. She had a badge and she was polite and she knew things about the system that a contractor shouldn't know. Ryan paused. But he described her. And ma'am, I have seen that woman in the administration building. Maya went very still. Describe her. Ryan did. And Maya listened to a description of a 43-year-old woman with dark hair and a Navy-issue calm, and something at the base of her skull went off like a wire pulling tight. Chief, she said. Did he say contractor, contract billet? That's what the badge said. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Owens is not a contractor, Maya said. She's active duty, former naval intelligence. She's been the administrative coordinator for this training center for 4 years. She stood up. And she was in my office on day 1 before I'd finished unpacking with a folder, telling me she'd been assigned as my point of contact. Assigned by who? The two of them looked at each other. I never asked, Maya said. She didn't go at Patricia directly. Instead, she did something worse and smarter, and considerably more dangerous. On Monday morning, she called Patricia into the operations annex and asked her to build the personnel manifest for Thursday's overwater exercise. All 18, Patricia said. All 18. Boat assignments, insertion order, comms, call signs, medical flags, the whole package. I want it clean, and I want it in the system by tomorrow noon. That's fast. Everything about this program is fast. That's the point of it. Maya handed her a legal pad. I wrote it out by hand. Old habit. Patricia took the pad, scanned it, and for exactly 1/3 of a second, something happened behind her eyes, a flicker of processing of a professional, recognizing that she was holding something valuable. Maya saw it. Maya had been waiting for it. I'll have it up tonight, Patricia said. Tomorrow's fine. I'll have it up tonight. And she left. Ryan came out of the back office 30 seconds later. Ma'am, that manifest is wrong. That manifest is entirely wrong, Maya said. Every boat assignment is inverted. Every call sign is shifted by 1. The insertion order is reversed, and I've got Vargas listed as element lead when Vargas is going to be on the safety boat. She set down her pen. If anybody acts on that manifest Thursday morning, they'll act on it in a way that's visible from a mile away. You just fed a false roster to a woman you can't prove anything about. Yes. And if she's clean, then a manifest gets corrected Wednesday afternoon and nobody ever knows there was a test, Maya said. That's the whole reason it's the right move. It costs nothing if I'm wrong. Ryan sat down across from her. And if you're right, if I'm right, Maya said, then somebody is going to do something on Thursday morning that they cannot undo. The review board convened on Wednesday, 2 days early. Nobody told her it had moved. She found out at 0650 when Vance called her office and said without preamble, They pushed it to today at 1000, and I found out 11 minutes ago, and I am telling you as fast as I physically can. Who pushed it? The scheduling authority is operations support. You. It is not me, Vance said, and for the first time, the warmth was gone out of his voice entirely. Sterling, I did not move that board. Somebody moved it under my billet code, and I have spent the last 10 minutes trying to find out how, and I want you to understand what I'm telling you. Somebody in this building is using my authority, and I did not know that was possible until this morning. Maya closed her eyes for 1 second. Commander Vance? Yeah. 3 years ago, you were in a coordination cell. You passed a threat package to a chief named Ryan Walker on a night when his extraction went bad and 2 of his men didn't come home. Silence on the line, long enough that Maya could hear him breathing. Yes, Vance said. I did. Where did that package come from? It came from. He stopped. It came from theater intel routed through my cell for distribution. Did you build it? No, I passed it. Did you verify it? Another silence. No, Vance said. It came in stamped and I passed it. That's what the cell did. That's what the cell was for. His voice had changed. Sterling, why in God's name are you asking me about that night? Because I need to know if you've ever gone back and looked at it. Every year, Vance said. Every single year on the anniversary. I pull it, and I read it, and I put it away. And the sourcing is thin, Vance said quietly. It's always been thin, and I have told myself for 3 years that thin isn't the same as wrong. Maya opened her eyes. Commander, she said, I need you at that board today, not to defend me, to watch the room. I need to know who talks and who doesn't, and I need somebody in there whose only job is to notice. You're asking me to spy on my own building. I'm asking you to pay attention in it. Vance was quiet for 3 seconds. 1000, he said. I'll be in the back. The board went the way she expected it to go for about 19 minutes. 4 officers, a stack of documentation, and a series of questions about metrics, completion rates, attrition, comparative performance against the previous curriculum baseline. Maya answered them flatly and completely. She had the numbers. She'd had the numbers since Tuesday. Then a captain named Doyle set down his pen. "Commander Sterling, I'd like to discuss the incident on your first morning." "Yes, sir." "You physically engaged 3 senior enlisted personnel." "I responded to an unwanted physical contact from one and to a directed advance by 2 others." Chief Walker filed a grievance. He withdrew it. "Under pressure." "You'd have to ask him, sir." "I did," Doyle said. "This morning." He said, and I'm quoting from my notes, "I withdrew it because I was wrong, and I'd rather be wrong out loud than right on paper." Doyle looked up. "That's an unusual thing for a man like Walker to say." "Yes, sir, it is." "Is that your doing?" "No, sir," Maya said. "It's his." Doyle looked at her a moment longer. Then he moved on, and the board moved on, and Maya sat there with her hands folded and thought that she was going to survive this after all. And then, at the 41-minute mark, the door at the back of the room opened, and Patricia Owens walked in with a folder. "Apologies, sir. Late document. It came through the office this morning flagged for the board." Doyle took it, opened it, read for 11 seconds, and Maya watched every drop of blood go out of the top of Captain Doyle's face. "Commander Sterling," he said, "are you aware of an operational review currently open regarding an incident in your previous assignment?" The room went silent. "No, sir." "You're not aware?" "No, sir. My last assignment concluded with a full debrief, and I was released to reassignment on medical and administrative clearance. Nothing was left open." Maya's voice was completely level. "May I ask what document you're holding?" Doyle turned it around, and Maya looked at a preliminary finding on the operation that had killed 9 people. Her 9 people with a date stamp from 4 days ago, an authority line she didn't recognize, and one paragraph that made the entire room stop breathing. Preliminary assessment indicates the compromise originated from within the operational element. Commander M. Sterling's decision-making sequence is under review as a contributing factor. Nobody said anything. Maya read it 3 times. Then she said very quietly, "Sir, who signed this?" "The authority line is a billet code." "Yes, sir, it is." She looked up. "Would you do me one favor before this board makes any determination about my program?" "Go ahead." "Try find the human being attached to that code," Maya said. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait." Vance caught her in the corridor afterward, and he was shaking. "That's the same code." "Say it again." "That's the same billet code that moved the board," Vance said. "I pulled it 11 minutes before you walked in. It's the same code that closed the March maintenance flag. It's the same code that approved your posting, and it does not have a name attached to it. And Sterling, I have been in the Navy for 19 years, and I did not know that was possible. It's possible if somebody built it that way." "Who builds a person out of nothing?" "Somebody who needs to make decisions that can't be traced to a decision maker," Maya said. "Somebody who needs to move billets, close inquiries, and open reviews without ever appearing in a room." Vance ran a hand down his face. "They're building a case against you." "They're building a lid," Maya said. "There's a difference. A case is something you prosecute. A lid is something you put over a hole so nobody looks in it." She started walking. "Whoever did this needed one thing above all else. They needed the 9 people I lost to be my fault. Because if it's my fault, it's a bad call. And if it's a bad call, nobody ever asks how the enemy knew where my team would be 11 hours before my team knew. And if it's not your fault." Maya stopped. "Then there's a person in the United States military," she said, "who has been selling operators." That night, Ryan Walker did something that had nothing to do with the investigation, and changed everything anyway. He stood up in the training bay at 2100 in front of 22 other people and said, "I need to tell you all something, and I need to do it once, and I'm not going to do it well." The bay went quiet. 3 years ago, I was ranking on an element that went bad, Ryan said. I split the team. 4 one way, 2 the other. The 2 were Danny Whitfield and Marco Reyes Ortiz, And I have been telling myself for 3 years that they died because I made the wrong call, and I've been walking around this compound making every one of you pay for it." Nobody moved. "Cole, that thing I said to you in February about your reload. That wasn't coaching, that was me needing somebody to be worse than me." Travis Cole didn't say anything. His throat moved. "Vargas, when you froze in the shoot house last year, and I said what I said in front of the whole class." Ryan's voice cracked. "You weren't frozen. You were the only one paying attention, and I punished you for it because it was easier than looking at myself." Elena Vargas looked at the floor. "Cho." Ryan turned. "2 weeks ago, I stood in a yard and told you that you didn't belong here. And the truth is, you're the smartest person in this building, and you've been sitting on information for 4 months that could get you buried, and you kept coming to work anyway. I don't know what that is, but it isn't cowardice, and I was the coward that morning, and I'm sorry." Cho didn't trust himself to speak. "I don't know how to fix any of that," Ryan said. "I know that I've got maybe 11 years left in this job, and I've spent 3 of them being the worst thing in the room, so I'm going to stop." He looked around. "That's it. That's all I've got." The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then Andre Ellis stood up. Then Elena Vargas. Then Travis Cole last slowest and hardest. And when Travis Cole stood up, the entire bay was on its feet. Maya watched it from the doorway where nobody could see her, and she thought about Alicia Ward, and she did not let herself cry, and she went back to her office and sat in the dark for 11 minutes. Thursday came. 0640. 18 personnel staged. 2 boats. A safety net that had cost her 4 days of paperwork to get approved. And a manifest in the system that was wrong in every particular. At 0658, Cho keyed his mic. "Commander, primary node just flagged for maintenance. Early. 12 minutes early. It's live now." Ryan. "Standing by. Vargas is on the safety boat. Ellis leads element 1. Cole leads element 2. Nobody moves off the real order, and nobody says a single word on the primary channel that isn't the false version." Maya's voice was flat and calm. "If they're listening to a lie. Let's make it a good one." For 22 minutes, 18 operators executed an exercise while speaking a fiction into the air. At 0721, Cho said, "Ma'am. Go. There's a query on the manifest." "From where?" "Internal terminal. Somebody just pulled the boat assignments." His voice had gone very high. "Ma'am, they pulled it twice. Once at 0719 and once at 0720, 41 seconds apart." "That's a person," Ryan said. "That's a person reading it and then reading it again because something didn't match." "Cho, can you locate the terminal?" "Working." "Cho." "Ma'am, I've got it. It's the administration building, 2nd floor." Cho's breath caught audibly. "Terminals in a shared workspace outside the operations support suite." "Whose credentials?" Silence. "Cho." "Whose credentials?" "Ma'am." Cho's voice had gone completely flat, the way voices do when the brain has run out of options. "The session's authenticated. It's a valid login. It's been active since 0450 this morning." "Whose?" "Master Chief Daniel Hayes." Maya did not move. On the water, 18 people executed a training exercise perfectly, and none of them knew that anything was wrong at all. "Ma'am," Ryan said quietly. "Ma'am, that can't be right." "Cho, how long has that session been idle before the query?" Checking keys." 94 minutes idle, then 2 queries in 41 seconds, then idle again." "That's not how his own terminal," Ryan said. "No," Maya said. "It isn't." She reached over and killed the primary channel with one hand. "Get everybody off the water," she said. "Now. Real order, real call signs, no explanation. And then find me Master Chief Hayes and do not let him touch a keyboard." "Ma'am, if it's not him," Maya said, "then somebody has been walking around this compound wearing him." They found Master Chief Daniel Hayes in the parking lot of a urology clinic in Chula Vista, sitting in a 9-year-old pickup truck with a paper cup of coffee going cold in the holder and a follow-up appointment card he hadn't looked at yet. Ryan Walker pulled in beside him at 0840 and got out without shutting his door. "Master Chief." Hayes rolled the window down. "Walker, what are you doing 40 minutes off compound in the middle of a scheduled evolution? Where have you been since 0450? "Excuse me. Where have you been?" Ryan said, "Since 0450 this morning. I need it minute by minute, and I need it now." Hayes went very still. Then he set the coffee down, opened his door, and stood up, and he was 61 years old, and he still made Ryan take half a step back. "Sancho," he said, "you are going to explain that question to me right now in the next 10 seconds, or I'm going to have you standing tall in front of the CO before lunch." "Your login was active on a terminal in the administration building at 0719, Ryan said. "It pulled a personnel manifest twice 41 seconds apart. It's been authenticated since 0450. Hayes didn't move. "That's not possible." "I know. I have been in this parking lot since 07. Before that I was at the pharmacy on 3rd. Before that I was in my kitchen." His voice had gone strange. "Walker, I haven't touched a keyboard today." "I believe you." "Then why do you look like that?" "Because somebody's been walking around this compound wearing your face," Ryan said. "And until about 90 seconds ago, Master Chief, I wasn't 100% sure it wasn't you." Hayes stood there in the parking lot of a urology clinic and absorbed the fact that a man he'd known for 6 years had driven 40 minutes to look him in the eye before deciding. "Good," he said finally. Ryan blinked. "Sir." "Good," Hayes repeated. "That's exactly what she'd have told you to do. Don't ever apologize for checking." He grabbed his cover off the passenger seat. "Now get in your truck. I'll follow you. And Walker, call her and tell her I'm coming in hot, and I've got something she's not going to like." Maya had the unit off the water by 0750 and standing in the training bay by 0830, and she did the hardest thing she had done since arriving in San Diego. She told them the truth. Not all of it. Not the ghost billet. Not the preliminary finding with her name in it. But enough. "Someone on this compound has been routing communications through a path that doesn't keep records," she said. "It's happened 4 times that we can document. This morning it happened during a live overwater exercise with 18 of you in the water." The bay was completely silent. "The manifest you executed this morning was false," Maya said. "I wrote it that way. Every boat assignment, every call sign, every insertion order. I fed a lie into the system to see who'd bite." Travis Cole's head came up. "You put us on the water inside a counterintelligence operation, and you didn't tell us." "Yes." "Ma'am, with respect." "Say it without the respect, Cole. You've earned that with me. You lied to us." Travis was on his feet now. "You stood in this bay 2 weeks ago and told us the only thing that doesn't lie is whether the man next to you will come back. And then you put a fiction in our mouths and let us say it out loud into a radio for 22 minutes without telling us." "That's correct." "Then how the hell are you any different from the number?" Travis's voice broke on it. "How are you any different from the 88% that didn't exist? And Maya, who could have deflected, who could have invoked rank, who could have said operational necessity, and ended the conversation, did none of those things. She said, 'I'm not.'" The bay went dead quiet. "You're right," Maya said. "I did to you exactly what I told you the system would do to you. I handed you a false parameter and let you execute it. And the reason I did it is the same reason they always do it, because I decided the mission was worth more than your consent." She looked around the room. "That's the whole disease, Cole. It's not that bad people do it. It's that good people can always find a reason. I found mine at 02 on Sunday morning, and it took me about 11 minutes. Nobody said a word." "So here's what I owe you," Maya said. "I'm not going to tell you it was justified. I'm going to tell you that from this second forward, every one of you gets the truth in real time, and if that gets me relieved, then I get relieved having told you the truth, which is a better outcome than the alternative." Elena Vargas spoke into the silence. "Ma'am, did anybody bite?" "Yes." 23 people stopped breathing at once. Somebody pulled the false manifest at 0719 and pulled it again 41 seconds later. Maya said. "That's a human being reading something and then reading it a second time because it didn't match what they were expecting to see." "So they had a version to compare it to," Ellis said slowly. Yes. Which means somebody's been getting the real ones. Yes. Travis Cole sat down heavily. Ma'am, he said, I'm still angry. You should be. But I'd rather be angry and standing here than comfortable and stupid. He looked up. What do you need? Hayes came into her office at 09:15, closed the door, and put a phone on her desk. Not his phone. A cheap one still in its plastic clamshell, the kind you buy with cash at a gas station. I've had that in my glove box for 4 months, he said. One number in it. Never used it. Whose number? The person who told me to keep looking after the March flag came back closed. Hayes lowered himself into the chair like a man whose knees had opinions. Commander, I'm going to say something, and then I want you to hit me, and then I want you to let me finish. Go. When you came to me last week with the relay, I already knew. Maya's face didn't change. I know you did. You know, you didn't ask me a single question that a surprised man asks, Maya said. You asked who else knew. That's not surprise. That's damage control. She folded her hands. I've been assuming you were either the best ally I have on this compound or the thing I'm hunting. I've been running both branches for 6 days. Hayes let out a breath that had 4 months in it. Both, he said. Sort of. That's the part I have to explain. Explain it. In March, after Reyes flagged the anomaly and the flag came back closed, I did what an old man does. I made phone calls. 9 years on this compound, you know, people. On the 4th call, somebody at a desk in Washington told me to stop. Hayes's jaw worked. Not stop, it's nothing. Stop. In the voice people use when they're doing you a favor at some personal cost. And you stopped. For 11 days, Hayes said. Then Reyes got his reassignment order, and I stopped stopping. What did you do? I wrote it down, all of it, by hand. He nodded at the phone. And then I did the only smart thing I've done all year. I found somebody with a badge that outranks the problem, and I handed it to them, and I have been sitting on my hands for 4 months, waiting for permission to be useful. Maya looked at the phone. Who's the number, Master Chief? Hayes told her. And Maya Sterling, who had not been surprised by very much in 11 years, sat back in her chair and said, You have got to be kidding me. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Owens came into the operations annex at 1000 alone and shut the door behind her without being asked. Ryan was standing against the back wall. Cho was at the terminal. Maya was sitting. Before anyone says anything, Patricia said, I pulled the manifest twice this morning, 0719 and 0720. It was me. On Master Chief Hayes's credentials, Maya said. On Master Chief Hayes's credentials. And you're telling me this before I ask. I'm telling you this because at 0840, I watched you stand in a training bay and tell 23 operators that you'd lied to them, Patricia said. And I've been doing this job for 4 months, and that's the first time I've been certain about you. Ryan came off the wall. Ma'am, she's the one who took Reyes's notes. I am, Patricia said. I took them to a safe in a federal building in San Diego, where they still are, and I told a 26-year-old kid a story about being a contractor, because if I'd told him the truth, he'd have told his chief, and his chief would have told somebody, and the notes would have burned inside 48 hours. She reached into her jacket and put a credential wallet on the table. Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Counterintelligence. I've been the administrative coordinator at this training center for 4 years, which is exactly how long it took to become invisible enough to be useful. Cho said very quietly, Oh. You've been undercover in an admin billet for 4 years. I've been an administrative coordinator for 4 years, Patricia said. For 3 of them, that's all I was. Then March happened. She sat down without being invited. Commander, I'm going to be very direct with you because we no longer have the luxury of anything else. I did not put you here. I didn't know you were coming until 11 days before you arrived. And when I saw the orders, I stopped sleeping. Why? Because I'd been building a picture of an actor inside this system who moves people, Patricia said. Reassignments, billet swaps, somebody who can put a person where they need them and remove a person who's in the way, and do it through a personnel apparatus that nobody audits because everybody assumes somebody else is auditing it. She met Maya's eyes. And then a commander with 9 dead operators and a sealed record got dropped onto my compound through a billet that had already been filled. Sterling, you didn't arrive here. You were delivered. Hayes told me. Hayes told you because I told him to, Patricia said. The night before your orientation. He's the only person on this compound I've read in, and he's the only reason I haven't been burned, and I want that on the record in this room, because he's been eating it silently for 4 months, and he doesn't deserve to. Hayes from the doorway said, It hasn't been that bad. You've lost 11 pounds. That's the medication. It's not the medication, Danny. And there was something in the way she said his first name, 4 months of shared weight in 2 syllables, that told Maya more about what this compound had cost these 2 people than any file could have. She looked around the room. An NCIS agent in an admin billet. A master chief with a burner phone. A 27-year-old intelligence officer who'd been carrying a secret since March because nobody would listen. And a SEAL chief who'd driven 40 minutes to look an old man in the eye before he'd accuse him. All right, Maya said. Then let's stop being 4 separate people who are afraid of each other. The compound turned on itself over the next 36 hours, and it happened the way it always happens, which is quietly and from the inside. Somebody put it out that the overwater exercise had been aborted for a security incident. That was true. Somebody else put it out that the security incident was internal. That was also true. And in the gap between those 2 facts, 23 people who had spent 3 weeks learning to trust each other started doing arithmetic. Andre Ellis found himself alone in the chow line on Friday. Travis Cole heard a first-class petty officer from a different unit say the words, "She's cleaning house," in a passageway, and put him against a wall hard enough to leave a mark on the paint. Elena Vargas came to Maya's office at 2100 and said, "Ma'am, I need to tell you something before somebody else does." "Sit. My brother works for a defense contractor, systems integration. He's got a clearance and he's been in San Diego for 2 years, and we have dinner every other Sunday, and I have talked about my job at that table because he's my brother, and because I didn't think—" Her voice failed. She got it back. "I didn't think. So if you need to pull me off the program, I understand, and I'd rather it come from me than from a file." Maya looked at her for a long moment. "Vargas. Ma'am, that's the second bravest thing anybody's done in this building this month." Maya slid a legal pad across. "Write down his name, his employer, and every conversation you can remember having with him about this unit. Not because I think you did anything. Because if there's a piece of this that runs through him without his knowledge, I would rather find it tonight than have somebody find it in 8 months and use it to end your career." Elena wrote for 11 minutes without stopping. When she was done, Maya read it and then read one line twice. "He does maintenance integration on COM architecture. He does software validation for yes, ma'am. That's part of it." "For which contractor?" Elena told her. And Cho, who had been in the corner pretending to be furniture, said, "Ma'am, that's the same company that holds the sustainment contract on the primary node." The break came from the last place. Any of them was looking, and it came from a 28-year-old operator who had never in his life been the first person awake anywhere. Andre Ellis knocked on the office door at 04:15 on Saturday morning. He was in civilian clothes. He'd been up all night. He looked like a man who'd been rehearsing a sentence in a car and had already thrown up once. "Ma'am." "Ellis, sit down." "I'd rather stand for this." "All right. 3 weeks ago I got a phone call," Ellis said. "In the evening, on my cell. Man said he was calling from operations support, said there was a credential migration going through and Master Chief Hayes was locked out of the system. Said he needed a verification code that had been pushed to a duty roster device." He swallowed. "I had the device. I was duty. He read me my own service number, ma'am. He read me the last 4 of my social. He knew my leave balance." Maya didn't move a muscle. "I gave him the code." The room was very quiet. "I gave him the code and I went and got a burrito," Ellis said, and his voice cracked all the way through. "And I have been sitting in that bay for 3 weeks getting better at this job and feeling like a person again. And last night I couldn't sleep, and I ran it back and I thought, Operations support doesn't call the duty phone at 1900 to fix a lockout. They send a ticket. He was shaking. Ma'am, I gave them haze. Whatever's been happening, I handed it to them, and then I went and got a burrito. Maya stood up. Ellis flinched. Actually flinched, a grown man with 2 deployments, because some part of him expected the thing that had always come next in his life when he'd been wrong out loud. She put a hand on his shoulder. Andre, look at me. He looked. That call took 4 minutes, and it was run by a professional who had your service record open in front of him, Maya said. You didn't fail a test. You were targeted by somebody who spent money and time and preparation on the specific problem of you. Her grip tightened. And you walked in here at 0415 on a Saturday to tell me when you could have said nothing for the rest of your life, and nobody would ever have known. I still gave it to them. You did. And in about 90 seconds, you're going to give me every detail of that call, and it's going to be the single most useful thing anybody has produced in 4 months. She let go. You know what the difference is between you and whoever's doing this. Ma'am. They also made a choice at 0415 one morning, Maya said. Yours was harder, and you made it anyway. Ellis put both hands over his face and stood in the middle of the office and did not make a sound. Cho worked the phone number for 19 hours. It was spoofed, which everybody expected. It routed through a carrier gateway, which everybody expected. What nobody expected was that the spoofing service had been paid for on a corporate account tied to a purchase order because the person running the call had done it inside a legitimate workflow on a legitimate contract. The way you hide a knife by putting it in a drawer full of knives. He didn't build a secret system, Cho said at 09 on Sunday, and his hands were unsteady on the keyboard. That's why nobody found him. He didn't build anything. He used the one that was already there. Every single thing he's done has been technically authorized. Explain that to me like I'm tired, Ryan said. The ghost billet isn't a fake person, Chief. It's a systems administration identity. It was created 11 years ago for exactly the reason it exists. Somebody needs to be able to make changes in a personnel database without their individual name being attached to every transaction. Because if you attach names, you can map the org chart. And if you can map the org chart, you can map the operations. Cho turned the screen. It's a legitimate tool. It was designed to protect classified assignments. Maya went very cold. Say that last part again. It was designed to protect classified assignments, Cho said. Unattributed personnel. Officers whose postings shouldn't appear in a searchable record. Cho, Maya said. Pull the creation authority on that identity. Ma'am, I've tried it. Not the billet code. The design authority. Who wrote the requirement? Who signed off on the architecture 11 years ago? Cho typed. Then he stopped typing. Then he said, Ma'am, I need you to sit down. Say the name. Captain Warren Keller, Cho said. Retired. He's ma'am. He's listed as the originating requirements officer on the entire unattributed personnel framework. The office was absolutely silent. Ryan looked at Maya, and what he saw in her face made him take a step toward her. Ma'am. She didn't answer. Commander. He recruited me, Maya said. Nobody spoke. 11 years ago, I was a lieutenant. He sat across a table from me in a building in Virginia, and he told me there was a way to do this work where nobody would ever know your name, and that the not knowing was the point, and that the operators I'd be standing next to would go home to their families, and I'd go home to an empty apartment and a file with holes in it. Her voice was perfectly steady, which was the worst part. He built the invisibility. He built the framework that made me a person who doesn't appear in a record. Ma'am. I was Alicia Ward's commanding officer for 4 years, Maya said. He spoke at her memorial. It was closed. 12 people. He stood up and he said her name out loud, which he wasn't supposed to do, and half the room cried, and I thought it was the bravest thing I'd ever seen a senior officer do. Patricia Owens said very quietly, Where is he now? Cho was already typing. Vice President of Program Integration, he said. For the contractor that holds the sustainment contract on the primary node. Maya stood up. He didn't just build the door, she said. He kept the key. He retired, and he went and got a job on the other side of it. They put it together over 11 hours on Sunday, and by the end of it, Maya understood why she was alive. "He needs something," she said. "That's the only explanation that holds. If I'm a threat, you don't move me across an ocean and put me in a building where I have 23 operators and a training program and a reason to look at things. You leave me in Virginia getting evaluated. You let the preliminary finding do its work, and you never think about me again." She was pacing now. "He pulled me here. He moved an officer out of a billet to do it, and that's the single most expensive, most visible thing he's done in 11 years, and a man that careful does not spend that unless he has to." "So what does he need?" Hayes said. "He needs to know what Alicia gave me." "Did she give you something?" "I don't know," Maya said. "That's the point. He doesn't know either." She stopped pacing. "She was the 9th, Maya said. "She was the last one. And in the 11 hours between when the operation was compromised and when it went bad, she called me twice. Not on the operational net. On a personal line from a location she shouldn't have been in, and she said 2 things that made no sense at the time, and I have been turning them over for 6 weeks, like a man with a stone in his shoe." "What did she say?" "The first time she said, 'Assume nothing, especially the people you like.' And the second," Maya's throat worked. "The second time she said, 'Maya, whatever happens, I already mailed it.'" Nobody breathed. "Mailed what?" Ryan said. "I have no idea." Maya's hands were flat on the table. "I assumed it was she had a daughter in Sacramento. I assumed it was a birthday thing. She was always 3 weeks late on everything I assumed." She stopped. "I have assumed for 6 weeks that a woman who called me from a compromised position to tell me to trust nobody used her second call to talk about a birthday card." Patricia Owens stood up so fast her chair went over. "Commander, where do your personal effects forward to?" "My mother's address in Bakersfield. It's the address on file. It's been the address on file for 11 years because I've never lived anywhere long enough to change it." "Have you been there since you got back?" "No," Maya said. "I've been avoiding it. She wants to talk about it and I can't." Patricia was already pulling out her phone. "Then there is a very good chance," she said, "that there is a package sitting on a kitchen table in Bakersfield that has been the only thing keeping you alive for 6 weeks." Warren Keller came onto the compound on Tuesday at 10:00 with a contractor badge, a briefcase, and a scheduled meeting on the second floor of the administration building. He came because Maya let it be known that he should. She did it the way you'd do it if you wanted a careful man to move not directly, never directly. She had Patricia file an access request for archived personnel transaction logs, time-stamped and routed through channels that would generate exactly one automated notification. She had Cho open a service ticket on the primary node. And on Monday afternoon, she stood in the passageway outside the administration building and told Lieutenant Commander Patricia Owens, at conversational volume, that she'd finally called her mother. Keller was on the compound in 19 hours. He found Maya in the training bay alone at 10:20. "Commander Sterling." She turned around. And there he was, 62 years old, silver expensively dressed in a way that still somehow read as Navy, with the exact same face he'd had across a table in Virginia 11 years ago. Warm. Genuinely, unbearably warm. "Captain?" "Warren, please. I've been out for 6 years." He set the briefcase down. "You look thin." "You look prosperous." He laughed. He actually laughed, and it was the same laugh, and Maya felt something in her chest tear cleanly in half. "I heard about the review," he said. "The preliminary finding. Maya, I want you to know that I've made calls. I've made a great many calls. Whatever that thing is, it's a bureaucratic reflex, and I'm not going to let it stand. That's generous. It's not generous. It's accurate." He stepped closer. "I've known you for 11 years. I know what you did in that valley. I've read what there is to read, and I've filled in the rest, and there is not a version of that night where the compromise came from your element." "No," Maya said. "There isn't. So let me help." "How would you help exactly?" "I still have friends," Keller said. "I can make the finding go away. I can make the whole review go away, and I can do it quietly. And nobody ever has to know we had this conversation. He smiled. That's how it's always worked for you, isn't it? Nobody ever knows. And that was the moment. Maya looked at him and thought about a 28-year-old operator standing in her office at 04:15, saying, "I still gave it to them." "Warren," she said. "Did Alicia mail it to you?" Keller's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes stopped. For one full second, the warmth stayed on his face, like a photograph of a warmth that had already left the room, and Maya watched a man she had trusted with her life for 11 years run a complete tactical assessment and arrive at the wrong end of it. "I don't know what that means," he said. "Yes, you do." "Maya, you've been in this building 4 times in 6 weeks," Maya said. "I pulled the visitor log Sunday night. 4 visits, all scheduled, all legitimate, all on the second floor. All within 90 minutes of a personnel transaction executed through an identity you wrote the requirements for 11 years ago." She took a step toward him. "You harvested a Master Chief's credentials through a social engineering call on a duty phone. You closed a maintenance flag in March and put a 26-year-old petty officer in Norfolk. You moved an officer out of a billet in May so you could put me in it. And 3 years ago, you pushed a threat package into a coordination cell that split a SEAL element 4 in 2, and the 2 didn't come home." Keller said nothing. "I want to know why you brought me here," Maya said. "Because you're the only person alive who might have it," Keller said. And there it was. He said it flatly without drama, the way a man says a thing he has been carrying alone for a long time, and the warmth was entirely gone now, and what was underneath it was something Maya had never seen on him and recognized immediately because she had felt it herself. Exhaustion. 11 years, Keller said. 11 years of building a system whose entire purpose was to make American operators unfindable. Do you have any idea what that's worth to people who want to find them? Don't. I'm not asking for sympathy. Don't you dare do the speech. Maya's voice cut across the bay like a round going by. Don't tell me about the pension or the divorce or the daughter's tuition or whatever the architecture of it was. I don't care. 9 people, Warren. My 9. And Danny Whitfield and Marco Reyes Ortiz makes 11. And Reyes in Norfolk is 12, if you count the ones you didn't kill, and you're going to stand in my training bay and explain the economics. I never sold an operation, Keller said. Not one. I sold movement, timing, position. That's all it ever was. They're the same thing. They are not the same. Alicia Ward bled out in a culvert for 4 hours. Maya's voice broke and she let it break. 4 hours, because a man who was supposed to be 20 minutes out was 11 hours late, because somebody knew our transit window before we did. You didn't sell timing. You sold her. And then you stood up at her memorial and said her name out loud, and half that room cried, and I thought you were the bravest man I'd ever met. Keller closed his eyes. Yes, he said. I did. And that was when Ryan Walker came off the wall. Maya didn't see him move. She heard it, the sound of 220 pounds crossing a training bay with 3 years of grief behind it, and she turned and got a hand into his chest, and it was like putting a hand into a moving vehicle. Chief, he fed me the split. Ryan was not shouting. That was the terrifying part. Ma'am, he fed me the split. He put my boys on that road. I have been carrying it for 3 years. I have been ruining people for 3 years. I know. Get out of my way. No. Ma'am. Ryan. She had both hands on him now, and she was giving up ground an inch at a time and holding anyway. Look at me. Look at me. He looked. If you touch him, it's a fight in a training bay between a chief and a civilian contractor, Maya said. That's the story. That's the entire story forever. Somebody in an office writes altercation, and this becomes a personnel matter, and every single thing he did to your men becomes background. Her voice dropped. He gets to be the victim of an unstable operator. Danny and Marco become a footnote in your disciplinary file. Is that what you want their names to be? Ryan was shaking. That's not enough, he said. I know it isn't. That's not enough, ma'am. It's never enough, Maya said. It wasn't enough for me either. I stood in a room in Virginia 6 weeks ago, and I wanted the whole world to burn, and there was nobody to hand the match to. And every single day since then, I have had to decide what I was actually for. She held his eyes. I'm not for revenge, Ryan. I'm for the 18 people who were in the water on Thursday. And the next 18. And the ones after that who don't know his name and never will and get to come home anyway. Ryan Walker stood there for 4 seconds with his fists closed. Then he opened them. Then he stepped back. And Warren Keller, watching from 6 feet away, said, "You've turned him." "No," Maya said. "He turned himself. That's the part you never understood about any of us." The doors at both ends of the bay opened at the same time. Patricia Owens came through the north end with her credentials out and 4 federal agents behind her. Master Chief Daniel Hayes came through the south end and stopped where he was because his part was already done. Keller looked at the doors, then at Maya. "Bakersfield," he said. "Is there actually a package?" Maya reached into her jacket and set a padded envelope on the table between them, still sealed, addressed in handwriting that Warren Keller had seen on 11 years of after-action reports. "My mother opened her mail on Sunday," she said. "She's been keeping it by the toaster since April. She thought it was a book." Keller stared at it. "You never had to bring me here," Maya said. "That's what I want you to understand while they walk you out. You could have left me in Virginia. I'd have been under review for 2 years, and I'd have lost, and I'd never have looked at a maintenance log in my life." She picked the envelope back up. "You built a system to make people invisible, and then you couldn't stand not knowing what one of them had done. Alicia beat you with a stamp." Patricia read him his rights in the middle of the training bay. He didn't resist. He didn't say anything else. He walked out between 2 agents with his hands behind his back, past Andre Ellis and Elena Vargas and Travis Cole and Daniel Cho and 19 other people who had come to stand along the bulkhead without being ordered, to none of whom said a word. At the door, Ryan Walker was the last one in the line. Keller looked at him. Ryan looked back. "Danny Whitfield," Ryan said. "Marco Reyes Ortiz." That was all he said, and Warren Keller flinched harder at that than he had at the handcuffs. The envelope sat unopened on Maya's desk for 11 hours. Patricia Owens wanted it opened in a federal building with a custodian and a camera. Cho wanted it imaged before anybody touched it. Hayes wanted it opened at all immediately on the grounds that a man who had waited 4 months had earned the right to stop waiting. Maya wanted none of those things and said so. "It's evidence," Patricia said. "It's a letter from a dead woman to me." "Commander, I know what it is legally. I'm telling you what it is." Maya didn't raise her voice. She hadn't raised her voice since the training bay. "Patricia, I've spent 11 years handing things to people. Reports, bodies, after-action summaries, my own name. I have never once been the last person to touch something before the system took it." She put 2 fingers on the edge of the envelope. "I'm going to open it here with you standing in this room, and Cho is going to photograph every page before it goes anywhere. And then I'll give it to you, and I won't ask for it back." Patricia looked at her for a long moment. "Gloves," she said. "Fine. And Danny stays." "He was always staying." Hayes from the corner said, "Damn right I was." Maya slit the top edge with a letter opener that had come with the desk. What came out was not what any of them expected. Not a thumb drive, not a dossier, not the sealed operational packet that Cho had been quietly hoping for since Sunday. It was a spiral notebook. 41 pages of handwriting in blue ballpoint, dated with a coffee ring on the cover and a corner that had been chewed by something with teeth. "That's a field book," Ryan said. "That's Alicia's field book." Maya's voice had gone strange. "She kept one for 19 years. She wrote everything by hand because she said a keyboard was a witness she hadn't vetted." "Ma'am," Cho said carefully, "if it's handwritten, it's not going to have system logs. It's not going to have transaction IDs. It's—" "Cho." "Ma'am, read the first page." Cho leaned over. "Read it." And his face did something complicated. "If you're reading this, I'm dead, and Maya is not, and that means I got it right." Nobody spoke. Warren Keller told me in 2019 that he'd built the unattributed framework so people like us could disappear. He said it like a gift. It took me 4 years to understand he'd said it like a man describing his inventory. Hayes lowered himself into a chair. "Keep going," Maya said. It took them 6 hours to work through 41 pages, and by the end of it, the room had gone quiet in a way that had nothing to do with discipline. Alicia Ward had been building a case for 2 years. She hadn't had access to the systems. She'd had something better and slower. She'd had memory and a pen, and 19 years of relationships across 4 commands. And she had done the thing that no digital investigator can do, which is notice what does not happen. She had logged every operation in which a transit window had been altered inside 72 hours of execution. She had logged which of those alterations had come through a coordination cell and which had come through a personnel channel. She had written down in her own hand the names of 11 officers who had been reassigned within 90 days of raising a question, and next to each name she had written where they had gone and whether anybody had followed up. Nobody had followed up. Not once. In 11 cases. That's not evidence, Patricia said quietly. That's an index. Say that again. It's not proof of anything on its own. But it's a map of exactly where to dig, and it's contemporaneous, and it's in the handwriting of a decorated master chief who died on an operation this describes. Patricia sat back slowly. Commander, I've been building a picture for 4 months out of maintenance logs and access records. She built a better one out of a notebook. She'd have liked hearing you say that. I'd have liked saying it to her. On page 29. Alicia had written a paragraph that Maya read 4 times and then stood up and walked out of the room. Nobody followed her. She came back 11 minutes later with her face composed and her eyes red and said, "Cho, photograph 29, and then read it out loud because I can't, and it matters." Cho cleared his throat. I keep coming back to the thing that bothers me most, which is that he isn't doing it for money anymore. I think he did it for money in the beginning, and then he got old, and the money stopped being the reason, and the only thing left was that he'd already done it. Men don't keep going because they want to. They keep going because stopping means admitting what the last 11 years were. If I'm right, then he will eventually have to know what I knew. That's the flaw. He can't leave it alone. And whoever he comes for, he'll come warm. That's how he does it. He'll come with his hand out and something generous in his mouth. Maya, if that's you, and I think it's going to be you, don't let him be warm at you. Make him say it. He'll say it. He's been waiting 11 years for somebody to make him say it. Ryan Walker put his face in his hands. She called it, he said. She called all of it. She called the tone of voice. Yes. Ma'am, how did she? Because she was better at this than any of us, Maya said. That's the whole answer. She was better at it than me, and she was better at it than him, and the only thing she wasn't better at was being in a culvert with a leg wound for 4 hours. The room stayed silent for a while after that. Then Hayes said, "What do we do with it?" And Maya said, "Everything." The review board reconvened 8 days later, and it did not go the way anybody had planned, including Maya. She had prepared for a fight. She had a binder. She had Cho's forensic timeline, Patricia's federal affidavit, Hayes's 4 months of handwritten notes, and a statement from a petty officer in Norfolk who had flown back on his own dime and his own leave to give it in person. She did not need any of it. Captain Doyle called the board to order, and then he said, "Before we begin, I'd like to address the preliminary finding entered into this proceeding on the 22nd. Sir?" "It's been withdrawn." Maya said nothing. "It was withdrawn by the originating authority 9 days ago," Doyle said. "There is no originating authority. The withdrawal was executed by NCIS under a federal seizure order, and the entire document has been reclassified as an artifact of a criminal enterprise rather than a finding of this Navy." He set down his pen. "Commander Sterling, I want to say something on the record, and I want it minuted exactly as I say it. 8 days ago, I read a document that accused you of getting 9 people killed, and I read it out loud in this room to your face. I did that because it arrived through a channel I had no reason to doubt. Yes, sir. You asked me to find the human being attached to the authority line. I did, sir. There isn't one." Doyle's jaw tightened. "There has not been one for 11 years on any of the 406 transactions that Identity has executed. I have spent 8 days on that number, and I would like the record to reflect that I did not sleep well." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Sir, permission to say something that isn't about me." "Granted. You read it out loud to my face, she said. And then when it turned out to be wrong, you withdrew it out loud to my face in front of the same 4 officers. She held his eyes. Sir, that's the entire job. Everything else is administration. Doyle looked at her for a long beat. Then he said, the board's determination on program viability is unanimous continuation with expanded scope. Get out of my hearing room, Commander, before I say something warm. The compound did not heal quickly because compounds don't. It healed the way real things heal, unevenly in the wrong order, with parts of it going numb before other parts started hurting. Andre Ellis got a letter of counseling in his file for disclosing a verification code over an unsecured line. Maya wrote it herself. She wrote it because if she hadn't, somebody else would have written it worse, and because Ellis had asked her to. I want it in there, ma'am. Why? Because in 6 years, I'm going to be a chief, and there's going to be a kid on duty who gets a phone call from a nice man who knows his service number, Ellis said. And I want to be able to open my own file in front of him and say this happened to me, and I told somebody. Maya wrote the letter. At the bottom of it, in the comment field, she added one sentence that was technically outside the format and that no reviewing officer ever removed. This service member self-reported at personal cost, with no external pressure. That is the behavior this Navy should be building. Ellis read it standing in her office, and then had to go stand in a passageway for a minute. Travis Cole got nothing in his file because the first class he'd put against a bulkhead never reported it, and because 2 weeks later, that same first class asked to be considered for the program's second cohort. Why? Maya asked him. Because he was defending his commander, ma'am, and I said something stupid about somebody I'd never met. The kid shifted. And because I'd like to be in a unit where that happens. Elena Vargas's brother was interviewed for 9 hours by federal agents and cleared completely, and it turned out that a software validation ticket he'd closed in February had been the thing that let Cho establish when the sustainment contractor's access had first been abused. He hadn't done anything wrong, he'd just been standing near it. Elena told Maya about the clearance in the passageway outside the bay, and then said, "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Always. Why'd you have me write it all down that night, if you didn't think I'd done anything? Because you were going to spend the next 5 years wondering whether I thought you had, Maya said. That's what happens when nobody tells you. Writing it down meant we both looked at the same thing at the same time, and once we'd both looked, there was nothing left in the dark for you to be afraid of. Elena nodded slowly. That's why you do all of it, she said. Isn't it? The breaking, the taking away the solution. It's all the same thing. What thing? Making people look at it, Elena said. Whatever it is, just making them look. Maya didn't answer that, which was an answer. Warren Keller took a plea 41 days after they walked him out of the training bay. He did not do it for mercy. He did it because Alicia Ward's index gave federal prosecutors 11 names, and 11 names gave them 4 cooperating witnesses, and 4 cooperating witnesses turned a difficult case into an arithmetic problem. Maya read the charging document in her office with the door closed. 23 counts. Conspiracy to communicate national defense information. Bribery of a public official. Wire fraud because the government charges wire fraud. The way a paramedic starts an IV automatically in case you need it later. What it did not say anywhere in any of the 23 counts was murder. She sat with that for a long time. Then she picked up the phone and called a federal prosecutor in San Diego and had a conversation that lasted 50 minutes and that she did not enjoy. Commander, I understand what you're asking me. With respect, ma'am, I don't think you do. I'm not asking you to charge homicide. I know why you can't. I've read enough law in the last month to know the causation chain doesn't hold up, and I'm not going to waste your time on a theory you'd lose. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to say their names in the sentencing memorandum, Maya said. All 11, 9 of mine and Danny Whitfield and Marco Reyes Ortiz, not as victims of a charged offense, as context. Her voice was very level. Ma'am, this man is going to be sentenced in a room where everything about him will be reduced to a transaction. That's what the charges are. Transactions. And if nobody in that room says out loud that there were people at the other end of the transactions, then he wins the last thing there was left to win, Silence on the line. You know he'll get 22 to 26 either way, the prosecutor said. I don't care what he gets. Commander, I genuinely don't, Maya said. I have thought about this for a month, and I have found the bottom of it. He's 62. 22 years is the rest of his life, whether it's 22 or 40. The number is meaningless. She closed her eyes. The names aren't. The names are the only part of this that's going to exist in 50 years, and right now they exist in a notebook in an evidence locker and in the heads of about 11 people who are all going to die. Another long silence. Send me the names, the prosecutor said. Spelled the way their families spell them. And Commander, send me one sentence about each. Not a service record. A sentence. Maya wrote them that night. It took her 6 hours to write 11 sentences. Master Chief Alicia Ward could not parallel park and refused to be taught. Petty Officer First Class Danny Whitfield sent his mother a postcard from every airport, including the ones he was only in for 40 minutes. She got through 9 of them, and then stopped and went and found Ryan Walker at 2300 in the equipment room, breaking down a rifle that did not need breaking down. I need Marco, she said. Ryan set down the bolt carrier. One sentence. One sentence. He thought about it for a long time. Longer than she expected. Long enough that she almost told him it could wait. He used to sing in the truck, Ryan said. Badly, on purpose. Because he figured out in about week 2 that if he sang badly enough, everybody got mad at him instead of scared, and I don't think anybody ever told him we knew what he was doing. Maya wrote it down exactly. Did anybody ever tell him? She asked. No, Ryan said. Do you want to be in the room? Ryan looked at the disassembled rifle for a while. Yes, ma'am, he said. I do. 11 weeks later. Chief Ryan Walker graduated first in the inaugural cohort of a program that had almost been shut down before it produced a single graduate. He did not graduate first because he was the strongest. He was not the strongest anymore. Andre Ellis had passed him on the water in week 9, and Travis Cole could outshoot him on any range on any day, and had stopped feeling the need to prove it. He graduated first because in week 14, in the final integrated problem, Ryan Walker stopped an element in a hallway with the objective 90 seconds away and said over an open channel, Negative, we're holding. The intel doesn't match, and I'd rather explain a failure than a funeral. He was wrong. The intel was fine. The scenario was clean. He had cost his element the objective, and there was no twist coming, no hidden lesson, no sabotage. Maya had built that problem specifically, to be honest, because after 14 weeks of teaching men to doubt, she needed to know whether any of them could still choose. He came off the floor expecting to be destroyed. Chief? Ma'am, I know. It was clean and I stopped anyway and I cost... Ryan. He stopped. 3 years ago, you had a threat picture that didn't smell right, and you executed it because a system handed it to you, and you'd been trained to trust the system, Maya said. 14 weeks ago, you'd have taken that objective in 90 seconds and been proud of it. Today you held a hallway on an instinct that turned out to be wrong in front of your whole cohort, knowing exactly what it would cost you. And I was wrong. You were wrong this time, Maya said. You will be wrong about a third of the time. That's the deal. That's the actual deal, and nobody tells you. She looked at him steadily. The man who never holds is right until the one day he isn't, and then he's right on the record. And there are 2 flags going into 2 living rooms. I'll take a chief who holds and is wrong. I will take that every single day for the rest of my career. Ryan didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, I still think about them every day. Good. That's a hell of a response, ma'am. It's the true one, Maya said. The day you stop is the day you've turned them into a story about yourself. You don't want that. You've been doing that for 3 years and it nearly ate you. He nodded. Chief, she said, can I tell you what actually happened in week 14? Ma'am, you didn't hold that hallway because you were afraid, Maya said. You held it because Danny Whitfield and Marco Reyes Ortiz were standing behind you, and you have finally worked out that the correct thing to do with the dead is to let them slow you down. Ryan Walker stood in the middle of a training bay, and cried in front of his commanding officer, and neither of them ever mentioned it again to anybody. Sentencing was on a Tuesday in a federal courtroom in San Diego. Maya sat in the second row with Hayes on one side and Patricia Owens on the other. Ryan sat directly behind her. Ellis, Vargas, Cole, and Cho came in civilian clothes and sat together in a block and did not speak for 2 hours. Warren Keller looked smaller. That was the thing nobody had prepared her for. Not diminished in some poetic way, physically smaller, the way men get when the suit stops being the point. He turned around once as they brought him in, and his eyes found Maya's immediately the way they always had, and there was still something warm in them, and she understood in that moment that the warmth had never been a performance. That was the worst thing she learned that year. He had meant all of it. He had liked her. He had recruited her because he believed she was extraordinary, and he had sold her transit windows for 11 years, and both of those things had lived inside the same man without ever touching. The prosecutor stood up and read 23 counts. And then she said, "Your Honor, before the government makes its recommendation, I'd like to read 11 sentences into the record." Keller's attorney half rose. "Your Honor." "Sit down, counselor," the judge said. And a federal prosecutor in a gray suit read 11 sentences out loud, in a room with 40 people in it. Master Chief Alicia Ward could not parallel park and refused to be taught. Petty Officer First Class Danny Whitfield sent his mother a postcard from every airport, including the ones he was only in for 40 minutes. Petty Officer First Class Marco Reyes Ortiz sang badly in the truck on purpose so that the younger guys would be annoyed instead of afraid. She read all 11. It took 90 seconds. When she was done, the room was so quiet that Maya could hear a court reporter's chair adjust. Warren Keller did not turn around again. He got 24 years. Outside on the courthouse steps, Ryan Walker said, "Ma'am, I thought that would feel different." "How'd you think it'd feel?" "Bigger," he said. "Louder. I don't know. Finished." "It's not finished. It's just true now." Maya put her cover on. "That's all a courtroom does, Chief. It moves something from being the thing you know into being the thing that's written down. The knowing was always the hard part, and we did that in a training bay 2 months ago." Hayes, coming down the steps behind them, said, "Speak for yourselves. I feel outstanding." "Master Chief, 61 years old and I finally finished something," Hayes said. "Let me have this." He retired 6 weeks later on his own timeline in a ceremony he'd tried 3 separate times to cancel. Maya spoke. She was not supposed to speak. The CO was supposed to speak, and had planned to, and had come to her office 2 days before and said, "Commander, I've written 400 words about 30 years of service, and it's the worst thing I've ever produced. Would you do it?" She stood in front of 200 people and said, Master Chief Hayes flagged an anomaly in March that everybody told him was nothing. It came back closed. A man he respected in Washington told him to stop, and he stopped for 11 days, and then a 26-year-old petty officer got orders to Norfolk, and he stopped stopping. She looked out at the crowd. For 4 months after that, he investigated a criminal conspiracy inside his own command, with a burner phone from a gas station, and a legal pad alone with no authority, no protection, and no assurance that anyone would ever believe him. He lost 11 pounds. He told his doctor it was the medication. Somebody in the back laughed and then stopped because it wasn't that kind of laugh. "Everybody in this Navy knows what physical courage looks like," Maya said. "We have a whole vocabulary for it. We give it ribbons. What we don't have a good word for is a 61-year-old man who keeps making phone calls after he's been told to stop, because he has correctly calculated that the worst thing that can happen to him is a career, and the worst thing that can happen to a 26-year-old kid is everything else." She turned to him. "Master Chief, you never once got to be sure you were right. You just kept going. That's the harder version, and almost nobody does it." Hayes was crying openly and did not appear to have noticed. Patricia Owens was standing at the end of the front row, and when the ceremony ended, she walked up and hugged him in uniform in front of 200 people, which was against approximately 6 regulations. Nobody said anything. 2 months later, Maya got an invitation to a wedding in Bakersfield and laughed for a full minute alone in her office. The program tripled. That was the part that surprised Maya most, and the part that made her most uneasy because success is the fastest way to lose the thing that made you successful. By the following spring, she had 4 cohorts, a permanent facility, 2 commands sending observers, and a mandate that had grown 3 times without anybody asking her whether it should. Captain Doyle came to see her about it. "They want you in Washington, Commander." "I know. You'd have the whole apparatus. Curriculum standardization across the enterprise. You could put this into every pipeline in the Navy inside 4 years." "I know." "You don't sound like a woman being offered a career. I sound like a woman who's read the org chart," Maya said. "Sir, if I go to Washington, I become a document. Everything I do becomes a directive that somebody in a bay in Coronado or Little Creek reads out loud to a room that doesn't know me, and it lands about as well as every other directive ever has." She leaned forward. "The only reason this works is that the operators in that bay have watched me be wrong in front of them. You can't standardize that. You can't put, 'She admitted she lied to us,' and stood there while we were angry into a curriculum document." Doyle was quiet. "Then what do you want?" "I want to keep teaching 120 people a year, and I want to send about 11 of them out every cycle who can run this themselves," Maya said. "It's slower. In 15 years it's bigger because it'll be real." 15 years is a long time. "Yes, sir, it is." Maya sat back. "Warren Keller built his thing over 11 years, and nobody noticed because he was patient and everybody else was in a hurry. I've thought about that a lot. I'd rather beat him at his own timeline than lose to him fast." Doyle looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm going to write that down and use it in a briefing, and I'm not going to credit you." "Sir, that's the most senior officer thing anyone's ever said to me. Get out of my office, Sterling." She never did get her record unsealed. That was the joke of it, the thing she'd never asked for and never expected, and that everybody assumed she must have wanted. 4 years of operations remained classified. The rescue of 5 men out of 6 in a hostile zone remained an operation that had not officially occurred. The 9 were still in the language of the system, a training-adjacent incident with an unrecoverable cause. Patricia asked her about it once over bad coffee on a Tuesday. "You could push it. After all this, you'd get it." "Probably. So why don't you?" Maya thought about it. "Because the ceiling was never the injury," she said. "That's what I got wrong for 11 years. I thought the thing that hurt was that nobody knew. It isn't. Half the men I served with are in records that don't exist either, and they're fine. And the reason they're fine is that the people who were there knew." She turned the cup in her hands. "The injury was that the invisibility got weaponized. Warren built a room with no windows so we'd be safe in it, and then he sold tickets. Fixing that isn't about putting windows in. It's about who has the key. And who has the key now?" 406 transactions got audited, Maya said. 22 people got charged or separated. And there's an NCIS special agent who used to be an administrative coordinator sitting in a permanent oversight billet that didn't exist 18 months ago, which she wrote the requirements for herself. She raised the cup an inch. "So, you do." Patricia looked at her coffee. "That's a lot of weight," she said. Yes, Maya said. "Try not to be warm about it." Chamtan. On the last day of the 4th cohort, Maya Sterling stood in front of 29 graduates and did the thing she had not done at any of the previous 3. She told them the whole story. Not the classified parts, she couldn't and wouldn't, but the shape of it. Alicia Ward's notebook and the coffee ring on the cover. A master chief with a burner phone from a gas station. A 27-year-old intelligence officer who pulled raw signal data on a standalone terminal because you shouldn't check a system with itself. An operator who came to her office at 04:15 on a Saturday to say I gave them the code when he could have said nothing forever. And a chief who put his hand on her shoulder in a yard on her first morning and was on the ground 3 seconds later. "He's standing in the back of this room," Maya said. "Most of you have been taught by him." 29 heads turned. Ryan Walker, now a senior chief, did not move and did not enjoy it. "I want to tell you what actually happened that morning, because there's a version going around this compound that's better than the truth, and I hate it," Maya said. The version says a woman put 3 SEALs on the deck and taught them a lesson. That's not what happened. What happened is that 3 men were humiliating a lieutenant in front of an audience because one of them was in so much pain that he needed somebody in the room to be smaller than he was. The Bey was silent. I said last warning, and I meant it, and he didn't walk away, and I put him down, and if the story ended there, it would be a story about violence, and it would be worthless. She looked around the room. It doesn't end there. It ends 14 weeks later with the same man stopping an element in a hallway 90 seconds from an objective because something didn't smell right and being wrong and doing it in front of everybody anyway. She let that sit. That's the graduation you're actually attending, she said. Not the fitness, not the shooting. Any of you can be taught to shoot by somebody with less rank than me and a better attitude. What you were taught here is that the parameters lie, the numbers lie, the intel lies. The system will hand you a stamped document and let you carry the consequences of it for 3 years. And the only thing in your entire professional life that will not lie to you is whether the person next to you will come back. Nobody moved. Some of you are going to be handed something someday that doesn't smell right, Maya said. It'll be stamped. It'll come from a nice man who knows your service number. And there will be a moment, it'll last about 4 seconds, where you'll know, and you'll also know exactly what it's going to cost you to say so out loud. She paused. Say it out loud, she said. That's the entire program. Everything else was conditioning. Afterward, in an emptying bay, Cho found her. He was a lieutenant commander now, on his way to a joint billet in Hawaii, and he had a manila envelope under his arm. Ma'am, I've got something for you, and it's not classified, and I've had it cleared by 3 separate people because I knew you'd ask. What is it? Alicia Ward's field book goes into a federal archive next month. Permanent retention. Nobody's ever going to read it again. He handed her the envelope. So I had page 1 and page 29 reproduced at archival quality, and Master Chief Hayes had them framed, and Special Agent Owens signed the release, and Senior Chief Walker paid for it, and made me promise not to tell you that. Maya opened the envelope. 2 pages in blue ballpoint. 19 years of handwriting. A coffee ring. If you're reading this, I'm dead, and Maya is not, and that means I got it right. She stood there for a long time. Ma'am. Cho. Yes, ma'am. On my first morning here, I told you that the delay came from a secondary relay calibration error, and that a report would be corrected by 1400. Maya looked up. It never was. I never corrected it. It's still in your file. Cho smiled. I know, he said. I left it there. Why? Because it's the only piece of paper in the United States Navy that proves you were watching, he said. Everything else you did is in a system somebody could edit. That one's a mistake in my file, and nobody's ever going to bother to fix a mistake in a lieutenant's file. He shrugged. I like knowing it's there. Maya laughed, a real one, surprised out of her. Get out of here, Commander. You've got a plane. Ma'am. He came to attention, which she had told him 14 separate times not to do indoors. Thank you for stepping in that morning. Cho. Ma'am. Anybody would have. No, ma'am, Cho said. That's the thing. 14 people were watching. Only one of them said enough. She hung the 2 framed pages on the wall of her office opposite the desk, where she'd see them every time she looked up. Ryan Walker came by that evening with a cup of coffee she hadn't asked for, which had become a habit neither of them acknowledged. He looked at the frames for a while. You know what I keep coming back to, he said. Tell me. That morning, in the yard, you gave us a warning. He shook his head slowly. You didn't have to. You'd already decided how it was going to go. I've watched you work for 18 months, ma'am. You'd read all 23 files on the plane. You knew exactly what I was and exactly what was going to happen the second I put my hand out. You could have just let it happen. Yes. So why the warning? Maya was quiet for a moment. Because I wasn't there to win, she said. I was there to find out who you were. And a man who walks away when he's warned is a completely different project than a man who doesn't. And if I'd walked away, then we'd have started somewhere else, and it would have taken 2 years instead of 14 weeks, Maya said. The warning was never a threat, Ryan. It was a question. Ryan Walker set his coffee down and looked at the two framed pages on the wall for a long moment. "I'm glad I got it wrong," he said. "So am I." He left. The compound went quiet the way compounds do at the end of a day, and Commander Maya Sterling sat alone in an office with a dead woman's handwriting on the wall, and 11 names in a sentencing transcript, and 4 cohorts of operators scattered across 3 fleets who would never know how close the whole thing had come to never happening at all. Her record was still sealed. It always would be. She had stopped needing it opened, because the men who had laughed at her in a training yard had not been beaten by her strength or her rank, or a classified file they were never cleared to read. They had been beaten by something none of them had recognized until it was standing 6 feet away, with its hands loose at its sides, a woman who had already survived the worst thing that can happen to a leader and had chosen on purpose to come back and make sure it never happened to them. They had called her useless. They had told her to find somewhere else to be. And she had stayed, and she had rebuilt every one of them from the ground up, and by the end, there was not a single man in that yard who would not have followed her anywhere on earth. That is what they met the day they ignored her last warning. Not a nightmare, a reckoning, and it saved them all.